Hey, I'm Luke, and today we're going to talk about cancer. Several months ago, my wife, Bailey, was diagnosed with stage 4 adrenocortical carcinoma. This is an extremely rare cancer, poorly understood, with very low survival rates. We're both pretty young for a diagnosis like this. It's a terrifying and emotionally complicated situation, and though it's my hope that no one else ever needs a video like this, if someone else does find themselves in this situation like ours, I'd like to think that documenting our struggles might help them figure things out. There were definitely moments where we really wished that we had some examples of how things went for people in a similar situation, but there really aren't that many people in this situation with this particular cancer. Of course, it's pretty unlikely that any of you will find yourself in this exact situation, as this really is just absolutely crazy, but I think that the extreme emotions at work here also offer kind of just some good general lessons and perspective, especially for people in relationships. If you're just here for the drama, that's honestly okay. I really don't see any problem with that, and neither does Bailey. This has been just completely awful for both of us, so if anyone can derive even shallow, morbid fascination from it, then that's for the better in our view. But before we get into all that, a quick update for my regular viewers. Yes, I am still working on my usual videos. I'm in the early to mid stages for a video on Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses series that I'm really hoping I'm going to have done sometime in the next few weeks. In any case, I'm starting to ramble. This is a hard topic. It's easy to want to procrastinate away from it. Note too that this video is going to be pretty depressing. And although I want to do a good job of explaining things, I honestly just don't have it in me to edit this video quite as heavily as I do my normal videos. So this is probably going to be a little bit more rough and unpolished than usual, both in terms of script and in terms of the actual video. Like if there's minor issues in my delivery here or something, I am not going to re-record it. I want to have this done. If I don't get it done soon, then I'm going to wind up just throwing out the script and not doing it. I've already kind of done that a few times. I want to get the video out there. I do have a script, by the way. I am reading this off of a teleprompter. That's anytime you see me reaching down randomly, it's towards this little thing because I wound up going off topic and just meandering on about something completely different like I am right now. That's not in the script, and I have to hit this button to go back down. So that's what I'm doing when you see me doing this. Most of my videos, I stay to the script pretty closely. This one, I'm really gonna kind of just do whatever hits me in the moment. This is an emotional, off-the-cuff, very subjective video. So I made a script just so I could have the timeline put together, but I also had Bailey read through the script so that she could correct any things I had wrong and add her own thoughts. We considered having her actually show up in the video as well, but honestly, she's so tired and it's so emotionally draining to go through this video. It was difficult for me to do it that I really don't want to ask her to be too involved. So she did read through the script and give comments and feedback and stuff. I baked that into the script, so you are getting her perspective here, but ultimately this video is going to be more about my perspective as a spouse and caregiver through cancer than about hers as the actual patient. I've also got a cocktail here just to set the mood, and also because it's delicious. If you're curious, this is a modified Manhattan. I got the recipe from AFK Tavern, a geek bar we used to go to all the time. It's just like a regular Manhattan, bourbon, vermouth, cherry, optional bitters, but you have to use Maker's Mark, and you have to add just a little tiny dash of Midori, which turns it into a Herald of Andraste. The Midori adds a little bit of green to it, and the Maker's Mark should be obvious why that's in there for anyone that's played Dragon Age Inquisition. But, really good. But, all right, so cancer. Just so we start on the same page, I'm going to start from scratch here. I'm Luke. My wife is Bailey. I'm 34 and she's 33. We met in a ballroom dance class in college in 2012. One day, I chased her down after class, despite seeing that she had headphones on, and asked her if she wanted to practice the waltz together. I showed up with a bottle of my dad's homemade mango wine. We danced to Waltz for the Moon from Final Fantasy VIII, a reference she did not get, and then we went to Olive Garden, which I swear to God, as a college student in Wisconsin, it was fine, it wasn't that bad of a date, where for reasons I will never understand, I told her about all of my exes and just did generally everything I could do to blow up the date. I have no idea what I was doing. I don't know if it was self-sabotage or what, but I just words fell out of my mouth. I don't know what happened there. Granted, she didn't even know we were on a date until after I paid. So After the dinner, I asked if she'd seen Alien. She hadn't, so we went back to my apartment to watch it and make out. No, she didn't stay the night. I did drive her home, but we did make plans to go to the mall together a few days later. This was Wednesday, February 22nd, 2012. She had an exam the next day, so we planned to meet up over the weekend. I couldn't wait that long, so I called her the next day and we had an early second date. And we've basically been best friends ever since then. Like, if not that day, then within like a week or two. It happened shockingly. I've dated before. She's dated before. I don't know that I buy the idea of like soulmates or fate or anything like that, but it worked right away. We stuck together when I went to Japan for a semester to work at the Nippon Electric Company. We talked on Skype as often as we could, even with the ridiculous time gap and the fact that she was taking like 15 or 16 credits or something that semester. She had a brutal semester to also be getting up late and really early and stuff to talk to her boyfriend in Japan. She came with me from Wisconsin to Seattle when I got a job at Microsoft. We got married in 2016. I made her wedding band with a creme brulee torch. I'll probably put a picture somewhere in the video here. No matter what happened, we always stuck by one another, always treating issues that affected one of us as though they affected both of us, equally as a team. That's a thing we've been saying since very early on in our relationship. Anytime something happened that was difficult for us, it was happening to both of us as a team. Well before we even got married, even before we moved in together. It was as a relationship, as a couple, things that affect us, even if they affect one of us, even if it's one of us affecting the other one, they're still affecting us as a group, and we would face them as a team. That's always been very important to us, and I think it's a lot of why we're as successful, both as a couple and just in life as we are. Of course, we've also hurt one another, sometimes very, very deeply, as really only people this intimately connected can hurt one another. But even in these situations, we have always been a team, and we always will be. There are a lot of ways to be a couple. For some people, secrets and separate private lives add to the novelty, keeping things fresh over years and decades. That's really not us. We share pretty much everything. Even before the diagnosis, I probably spent more time talking to Bailey than everyone else I knew put together, and then some. I honestly don't think I could ever grow tired of just talking to her, not if we had thousands of years and nothing else to do. On the very rare occasions when we've been apart for even just a couple of days, we missed each other terribly and called as often as we could. Back when I worked an office job, I looked forward all week to staying up late with Bailey on Friday and Saturday. Now that I don't have a normal job, I found that the weekend still retained its power over me because that's when Bailey is off. It's still the weekend, even if I don't really have a week, because she still does. As terrible as cancer's been, I've actually really enjoyed the extra time we've had together due to med leave. All of this is to say, okay, so this is something I kind of just need to get out of the way really early on here. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to be arrogant or condescending. I understand that everyone has problems and every couple thinks that they're the most in love. Not many people face losing a spouse this young to cancer, but how many people die in car crashes every day? In some ways, we're actually lucky, even if it doesn't feel that way, to get this extra time, that she wasn't just taken from me suddenly without warning. But my goal here is to describe both the reality of a stage 4 ACC diagnosis and the emotional journey that goes along with it. And that emotional journey might, at times, come off a little bit selfish, melodramatic, or arrogant. Trust that I'm just trying to convey the situation accurately here, including my subjective emotions. This is how it feels to me. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't see my perspective here as objectively correct. But this isn't a video about rational arguments, it's about my subjective experience. So, again, all this is to say that I am not a man for whom potentially losing a spouse comes easily. In some ways, our tight bond has helped immensely, as I can be there for Bailey in ways that a less intimate husband might not have been. I know her very, very well, and I know how to help when she needs help. But this is also just absolutely destroying me. Bailey is like... Bailey's breath to me if that makes sense. She's not a flower or a summer day. She's not merely beautiful and pleasant. Her attention and affection refresh and invigorate me. She's the path through which my own affection and attention resolve. Without her, all feeling and higher reasoning stop as my every thought descends into panic. I've imagined her final moment, or final moments, 1,000 times since the diagnosis, and I honestly can't imagine a version of that event in which she stops breathing and then I take another breath. I sincerely think that I might just stop breathing and die. I hope unequivocally that that's what happens. She's the world to me, or my sole window to it, and I feel as though the world is dying with her. The wind reeks of saline and decay. The sky is jaundiced. The ground is bloated. I used to take solace when I was upset in knowing that the world is filled with people and animals who are going on fine despite my troubles. Now I feel like I'm stuck in a dead world where all remaining animation is nothing but a cruel mockery of life. A world without Bailey is one without sapience, without thought beyond my own. I'll be stuck playing with bots, waiting in vain for another player to join the game, until I finally quit myself. I'll still have Radagast, of course, but Christ, I really don't even want to think about how he'll react. He throws a tantrum whenever Bailey takes a half-hour nap. So, I'm going to try not to get too bogged down in being poetic here. That's not what this is about. It's part of the reason why I have a script, even if I keep going off it. But when two people are together this intimately for this long, they start to grow together, shaping one another in turn. If she were gone, half of my vocabulary would just become a dead language. There's almost nothing I do in a day that isn't shaped by her and vice versa. The way I talk, the things I eat, my day-to-day schedule, my dreams and ambitions for the future. Bailey suffuses everything that I am to such a degree that I don't know what's left in her absence. Not one man alone, but half of a couple awkwardly cut away, leaving parts of me and parts of her in a shape that does not constitute a whole person. Like 3 arms, 1.5 brains, half a lung, no heart. Some pitiable aberration out of pulp horror serials. I've recently found that I have absolutely no tolerance for even hearing about a fictional person moving on from a relationship, particularly where a spouse or lover died. I don't mean this as a judgment on others. Not every relationship is the same, not everyone is the same, and if someone can move on and love again after losing someone, then that's great for them. But in our wedding, which we officiated ourselves, by the way, did you know that you can just do that? We got a legal marriage in a court, and we crossed out literally every clause that wasn't strictly necessary. We reserved the main dome at Ulbricht Botanical Gardens in Madison and designed a ceremony ourselves. In the actual moment, I stood alone in the room and waited for everyone else to arrive. Of course, Bailey got distracted, stopping the bridal procession to say hi to some baby quail, which I honestly expected once I saw that there were baby quail running around. We took turns facilitating the ceremony. We felt that our bond was stronger than anything else we knew of. There was no need to bootstrap our marriage on tradition or appeal to God to bless it. Our marriage is far more powerfully real than anything else in existence. Introducing anyone else into the contract would have only weakened it, as nothing else that has ever been will ever be as real or as significant as right as our partnership. Most people in attendance, and it was a small ceremony to begin with, could hardly hear our vows over the sound of running water. But we didn't care. I certainly didn't. We didn't need witnesses to hold us to our promises. By inviting them to our ceremony, we made our guests more real. Anyways, I didn't make my vows until death. I made them for the rest of my life. I did this intentionally, as I knew that Bailey will always be my partner. If she leaves, dies before I do, it's no different than staying up late without her. I'm still married to Bailey when she's asleep. Why would it be any different in death? Sometimes I miss her at night, too. I tend to stay up a couple hours later than her most nights, and though I always try not to wake her when I come to bed, I'm always secretly excited that maybe I'll just wake her up accidentally. Even just a few minutes of talking when I didn't expect it brings me joy that I can hardly explain. If I look hard enough into the setting sun, maybe she'll laugh with me before the morning comes. As I said before, when two people are together this intimately and for this long, they grow together. To move on would be to change without her, and that has become entirely antithetical to my truest self. I pray that I'll never change, never grow or move on in her absence. Yes, I am aware that this is not healthy, and I don't care. This isn't an argument, and I don't want to talk about it. What could anyone possibly say? To paraphrase Rand in chapter 33 of The Gathering Storm, I continue to wonder why you all assume that I am too dense to see what you find so obvious. Yes, this will destroy me. I know. He goes on to tell the story, which I'll paraphrase to make more accessible here. There was once a mountain so tall that no one knew was at the peak. Not because it was impossible to climb, but because doing so would take every ounce of strength, leaving none for the return. Helping Bailey fight cancer feels like that. I just need to get her through the treatment. Then she'll either survive and we can help each other recover emotionally, or she won't, and there won't be any critical need for me to return. My job is just to reach the peak, victory or death. I don't have the strength to carry supplies for the return anyways, so why bother worrying about it? Let the Eagles carry us home if we win. And yes, for my regular viewers, I understand the irony in specifically referencing Rand and the Wheel of Time here, given that my entire interpretation of that bit is basically the opposite of what I'm doing here. The memory of speaking such hopeful words in those videos, promising healing with time and perspective, remembering saying that tastes like ash in my mouth. I never used to really understand what that phrase meant, but yeah, ash. We used to have ferrets named Edward and Alphonse. A few years ago, Edward died. He had struggled with cancer for more than a year. Surgery and medication bought him time, but it finally ran out. The whole while I was worried what would happen to Al. Al absolutely loved his brother. When they were little, before Edward got sick, we noted early on that Edward loved people, Alphonse loved his brother. And we commented that it would have been a terrible tragedy if Ed died before Al. When Edward died, Al freaked out. He ran around the room in a panic. I showed him his brother's body to try to give him some closure, and he just freaked out. After that, he kind of just lied around, not interested in anything. Al died of heart issues less than 2 months after his brother. He just gave up. We were devastated, but I don't think life without his brother was preferable to death for poor Alphonse. Okay, so that's probably enough of whatever this has been so far. Let's go back to the script more and actually get into the timeline and details, the kind of stuff that'll actually be useful rather than me just kind of whining for a while. So you're probably aware that for cancer, detecting it early can often aid in the treatment. This is definitely the case for adrenal cancer. If you catch it early, before it spreads or grows too large, the surgery to remove the gland is actually pretty safe, and it generally succeeds in removing the entire cancer. Unfortunately, ACC doesn't really have many symptoms until it's really far along, and the few early symptoms it has are more commonly explained by other causes. Bailey's particular cancer produces a great deal of cortisol. The most obvious symptoms of this are elevated blood pressure and swelling, particularly around the face. They actually call this moon face. Seriously, that's a medical term. I have heard doctors say moon face more often than Cushingoid face. But the couple of years leading up to the diagnosis were practically perfect to hide the symptoms for us. As I mentioned before, we lost our ferrets, and that was in the summer of 2020 during the pandemic. I've got alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, which causes lung and liver damage and severely exacerbates respiratory infections, so we were taking COVID very, very seriously, which meant that we really weren't going out hardly at all or receiving visitors for most of the pandemic. We're actually still being careful now today. Now it's more about keeping Bailey safe during immunotherapy than for me, but we have been having a little more company and going out more, just really being strict about KN95s whenever we do so. But after losing the boys, we were pretty depressed. I know it's a millennial thing to put this much emotion and mourning into pets as though they are children, but judge if you want, that's how it felt. It was rough. We finally got a new pet, Radagast, our puppy, in the summer of 2022. And those first couple of puppy months were also rough, as we had to wrap up grieving for the boys while also taking care of a new puppy, which, if like me, you probably had a dog growing up. I mean, I don't know, probably. You may have had a dog growing up, but if you haven't had a puppy, they suck. It's really frustrating. They're very cute. It's very frustrating for a few months. We're in a nice big house now, but at that point we were still crammed into a pretty cramped little apartment, so there was no escape from the borking. Now, normally Bailey is extremely healthy. We've been vegetarian for several years now. Bailey tracks her food rigorously, and we both exercise regularly. We run races, spend hours each week on our stationary bike, and lift weights in our home gym, which is pretty impressive, stocked with a full power rack, barbell, adjustable dumbbells, and more. I'm in pretty good shape myself, but Bailey has always been much healthier than me. But in this period from 2020 to late 2022, we were pretty depressed, and though we were still healthier than most people we know, particularly considering the pandemic, we weren't quite as healthy and energetic as usual. On top of all that, we also bought our first house in the winter of 2022, which, particularly for the greater Seattle area, is just an absolute nightmare. The market was insane. I mean, we love the house now, and I do understand that, complaining about actually being able to afford our first house at a time when most people our age aren't even considering it. Like, most of our friends do not own houses, or if they do, they are not in the greater Seattle area. So I understand it's frustrating to hear, but understand that even though we're very, very lucky, it was also really, really stressful. Like, we had enough money to house. We didn't have enough money to screw up buying a house. So if that makes sense to you. Honestly, just all this shit for just a long while has been so damn stressful. But during this period leading up to the diagnosis, Bailey was also in a car crash. She was at a dead stop at a red light when two cars collided with her and absolutely totaled the car. This is also the period when I retired from software to work on creative projects, making Bailey our sole earner. I saved up enough money to handle half of my expenses, theoretically indefinitely. That was my goal, to be able to do it indefinitely. But still, more stress. I know that everyone has their own story for how the pandemic years were just crazy for them, and we were actually very lucky not to lose anyone particularly close to us to COVID. But again, this was all just so stressful. Honestly, we've kind of had a rough decade. I don't even want to go into all of it. We had a lot of problems in the family, a lot of tragedy. It's been a rough while. Those first couple of months at the start of 2022 in the new house where I was making YouTube videos, Radagast was finally getting out of his damn puppy phase, and Bailey was absolutely crushing it as a software engineer at a FANG company. Side note, I did out-earn her my last year in the office, but if I had kept working, she would probably be out-earning me by now. Like, I could not be more proud of her. I've been writing code since I was 13. I wrote my first physics engine from scratch in high school. I started at Microsoft right out of college. I remember ranting to her about algorithms the first couple of years that we were dating, and she just kind of nodded along with me. She didn't even start this career until she was in her late 20s. And now she's at least as successful of an engineer as I ever was, if not more so. But the point is that it felt like we had finally gotten out of a very long, very dark period. Like, that was the mood we had in January of last year, that finally things are good, we can just relax and live our lives. But We weren't really in a space where we would be able to notice things like some slight swelling or elevated blood pressure. Even if we had, no doctor would have jumped directly to adrenal cancer. Until pretty close to the diagnosis, all Bailey's symptoms could have been very easily explained away by just having an IUD. She actually got a new one shortly before the symptoms started, and things like a little bit of swelling or some blood pressure changes are perfectly common side effects to that. The symptoms could have also been described by she wasn't using her CPAP. She was depressed. We could have made a mistake in our vegetarian diet. Maybe we were missing some nutrient or something like that. Or maybe, and this is what we were really worried about, it was an early warning sign of some heart defect or autoimmune disorder which run in her family. Around March of 2023, the swelling accelerated until we just couldn't ignore it anymore. Over the course of just a few weeks, she went from having what we can only really identify in retrospect in photos from when we bought the house as some mild swelling around her face to being so swollen that she couldn't even fit in her shoes. Literally, she had to wear slippers and she kind of like exploded out of them. She was also just exhausted, which was partially due to the swelling. It is apparently really tiring to just be swollen everywhere all the time for weeks on end. When first visiting doctors, Bailey struggled to explain that, yes, she was still working out and still even getting relatively good times for an average person with a desk job, but they were significantly worse times than she had gotten just 6 months beforehand. And that this started very acutely. Our main worries were a heart issue or an autoimmune issue. She went in to see her primary care physician, who ordered a scan. That was on April 27th, 2023. And I will never fully forgive myself for letting Bailey go to get the scan alone. I was working on one of my Wheel of Time videos, or I might have taken a short break to play Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins, a game I loved and now cannot even think about. The lab was a fairly long way away, and we weren't really expecting anything serious. It was kind of just looking to see what was wrong. And honestly, I just didn't think we'd get the results back for a couple of days. Normally, we probably wouldn't have if they hadn't been such crazy results. She was actually in line for coffee just outside the lab when her doctor called, saying, "Do you have a minute?" To which she apparently responded, "I have a literal minute," because she was in line for coffee. At which point her doctor told her that she had to see an oncologist. She pulled over to call me and texted me a screenshot of the results, which indicated a 14.6 left adrenal mass and numerous liver lesions, some of which were more than 6 centimeters across. We didn't actually see the scans until later, but to my untrained eyes, it almost looked like she had a third lung, and her liver was absolutely huge, filled with tumors as large as a woman's fist. While she drove home, I started looking things up online. An adrenal tumor larger than 2 centimeters is stage 2 at best. Metastasis to a distant organ, such as the liver, means stage 4 automatically. Depending on where you look, stage 4 adrenal cancer's 5-year survival rate is 38% or lower. It is considered a terminal and incurable cancer. Bailey was still in the car, so I did the only thing I could think of. I ordered a bottle of wine. Not the exact same wine we had on our first date at Olive Garden, but the closest I could find. And I ordered a box of ridiculously unhealthy crumble cookies. I prepared to greet her with Radagast, treats, and stuffed animals. When she got home, I swept her into a strong hug and told her that she was probably going to die. Probably in the next 5 years or shortly after. I don't think I'll ever forget those moments after hearing the garage door close, waiting for her to walk inside, trying to figure out how I'd say it. It was Thursday, and Bailey's primary care physician was able to get her in to see an oncologist the very next day. That first oncologist did a very good job of admitting that he's never seen a patient with adrenocortical carcinoma before. Few doctors have, and anyone who's seen more than a handful of them is basically an expert, relatively speaking. He confirmed what I found online and gave an even more bleak prognosis. In the worst case, 6 months. In the best case, a couple of years. We asked if we should get a second opinion, and he gave us several recommendations. He ordered some more tests, including a PET scan, and referred to us to a pulmonary cardiologist who helped get Bailey's blood pressure meds sorted, told her to actually start using her CPAP, and explained that although she actually does have a bunch of tiny lung nodules, they are probably just scarring caused by a common Midwestern fungus and not cancer. But it was also Friday, so most of the appointments actually had to wait for the next week. We really only got in to see the oncologist that Friday. We spent the weekend in an absolute panic, torn between figuring out what to do next and just... I'm honestly not sure I can really fully describe those first few days, just emotionally, except to say that we really mourned her death. I'm really not a crier. I cry when a pet dies. I cried when my father died. Other than that, I haven't really cried since I was a little kid. Since the diagnosis, I might have cried more in the last year than I did the entire rest of my life, and I'm including being an infant. In those first few days, it wasn't even controlled. I would just collapse on the floor, curl up into a ball, and just sob and ramble incoherently. Early on, I told Bailey that if at any point in the process she hits her limit and just needs it to end, I would be glad to end it together. I saw with my father how unpleasant an end can be, even with morphine in a hospice center. Now, you don't know Bailey, but there's very little chance of this actually happening. She's a real fighter. She reveres the Klingon and the Aiel as personal role models. She also mentioned in the script that she wanted me to call it Spencer from Skyward here as well, but at this rate, it's going to be like a year before I actually get to Skyward. But she'll suffer through treatment just despite the tumors. Damn the odds. Oh, actually, on a side note, I don't think I worked this anywhere in the script, but we actually have taken to calling her tumor Bakori from Mage Errant. So if you watch my Mage Errant video, we call her tumor Bakori. Doesn't really fit anywhere, so I just said it. Again, I'm not going to be that careful editing this one. I'm drinking and just kind of trying to get it all out there. I don't know if Bailey's going to make it, but I can tell you with absolute 100% certainty that these tumors are fucked. They picked the wrong woman, or her body picked... You get what I'm saying? Bailey took off work and we set about trying to figure out what to do next. I found it to be surprisingly difficult to figure out what to do when you get a cancer diagnosis. There are loads of resources, but they're all really complicated and you just don't feel like you have the time to read and watch everything. I mean, there are a lot of types of cancer and everyone's situation is different, so I get that it's hard to have a single heuristic, but getting to the right team and starting treatment as soon as possible is probably the most important single part of responding to this diagnosis. Until the diagnosis, I guess I kind of thought this is what your primary care was for, but you actually do really need to shop around. Your primary care is going to do their best. They might give you some references, mention a referral. Depending on your cancer, maybe they actually will get you where you need to go if it's a very common cancer, if it's something that's the treatment plan is very prescribed. But you should look to see where you should go. It matters for something like this. Again, that's not to say that her PCP wasn't immensely helpful. There was a lot of tests ordered early on. Both she and the first oncologist we saw were extremely open to questions. They just getting our scans done so that once we got to the hospital we eventually went to manage our care, MD Anderson, we were able to bring them CDs of the images and such. That really, it helped save a lot of time just having all that. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit there. So we started off the next week focused on doing everything necessary to get Bailey the best treatment, even though I honestly didn't have a whole lot of hope. We researched cancer hospitals. The internet is great for this, but word of mouth is actually also really, really helpful. It's hard to tell what on the internet is an ad at this point. It is nice to just know some people. If you're as young as we are or even younger, try asking older relatives and friends. Like Bailey's parents in particular, her dad is great. He's got a huge social network and he was able to kind of tell us who he knew who knew someone that had done well on cancer before. Like he actually had a number of people that said, yeah, MD Anderson, we made the right choice. And that was really, really heartening to hear. But we're in the greater Seattle area. So Fred Hutch is right here. And they actually do see a significant number of ACC cases. But they're not the biggest hospital. Right away on Monday, May 1st, we contacted MD Anderson and Mayo Clinic, and we started scheduling appointments in parallel, ready to take the earliest option or even go with both until we got a feel for them. We ultimately canceled the Mayo Clinic appointment and just went with MD Anderson because when we got to MD Anderson, we were very, very impressed. We were very happy with what we were getting, and we figured that the flying around to other hospitals was going to be counterproductive at that stage. We'd rather just focus on MD Anderson. Bailey got a PET scan that Wednesday. There were so many appointments that, honestly, this whole time is a blur to me. I remember moments with such clarity, just excruciating detail, but trying to get this script written and write it all out chronologically, a script that I should probably pause, that trying to write it out chronologically was really challenging. In my mind, the first week and a half all took place in the same day. I have no recollection of which order those events happened in. They all happened at the same time to me.
It is not linear.
No. It's not linear.
I remember sitting in the lobby, waiting for her PET scan, buying a gardening gift set to surprise her with, along with the promise to do whatever she wants with the yard. With time to spare, I walked around to find a seat. I remember every detail of how that building, we only were there for that one scan. I remember I could probably build it out of clay. I found a spot to sit down and write her a poem. I remember each trip to the ER, when her blood pressure was so far out of band that we weren't sure what to do at home. I remember the first couple of appointments before the diagnosis, when we were still freaking out about heart issues and lupus. I don't need to document every little detail here. I'm trying to convey to you how urgent and confusing and raw all of this was, and still is to me. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, get a dedicated notebook and get comfortable being on hold. At every step of the process, if you're waiting on someone to do something, call them and see if you can expedite it. People want to help you if you're going through a tragedy. So ask for favors. They might say no, but people will try to do you a favor. People are good. They want to help people that are undergoing something this awful. Like even the rudest person you know, if they know that you have it rough, they'll find a little bit of sympathy for you. So it's worth asking. Even if you get a little annoying occasionally. What are they going to do at some point? Get mad that a husband is too dedicated to trying to help his wife? I'm sure I could have pushed it that far, but I don't think I did, and I called a lot. One time, there was one nurse that got mad at me for calling too much, but she wasn't doing her damn job. There's a whole other thing there. I'm not going to get into that. That's not important here. Also, if you get imaging done, ask if you can get a physical CD to take with you to show other teams, as medical record systems often miss images. You can usually ask either the front desk of the lab or some larger hospitals will have like a dedicated like imaging library or something like that. You should be able to find it. They're very prepared to do this. We do that automatically now just because images get lost. It's better just to have a CD. Cancer meds often need insurance pre-certification. You can expedite this by calling. For rare, weird cancers, the insurance process can be particularly messy as you might need to take meds that aren't technically designed for your specific cancer, and that might delay treatment, unless you can call and get things figured out quick. We definitely saved time, real time, probably days, if not weeks, by calling to expedite things. On multiple occasions, we found minor errors and were able to proactively correct them, and we begged people to speed things through. In a couple of cases, yes, this happened more than once, we discovered that someone was out sick and hadn't found a substitute for our case, and if we hadn't called, it probably would have gone until they got back from leave. If you haven't started treatment yet and are waiting on an appointment to get started, give the hospital a call and state clearly that you'd really like to start treatment as soon as possible, that you have not started treatment yet. That matters. That makes a difference. They will expedite starting treatment more than they will a checkup or something like that, because they want to get you started. The goal is to keep you alive and healthy. You have to ask for help when you need it. If you need labs, ensure that they're going to be collected before appointments where you meet with the team, with enough time in between for the results to be processed. Different hospitals have different lead times for this. MD Anderson, blood results get back in minutes. Some hospitals, it can take a little bit longer. Things like urinalysis might take hours or even a day. Like a biopsy could take weeks if they have to send it out, but they might not have to send it out. So just if you have labs and it's not a lab you've done before and you don't know how long it takes, it is worth asking and making sure, especially if it's something like you have labs in the morning and then meet with your team later that afternoon. That works. That is a perfectly fine plan if the labs will be done on time. It is worth looking into that. That, again, these are things that caused us real issues on multiple occasions. Hospitals really do a pretty good job for the most part. At least the hospitals we've been to have been very good. There's just so much going on that, I mean, a person can make one mistake in 10,000 actions and it could still lose you 3 days before you start treatment or something like that. It's so complicated and there's so much stuff to manage across so many different departments. It's not about keeping them honest or making sure they do a good job. It's about understanding that this is hard and a little bit of it is on you as a patient. And that sucks because you're going to be wiped out and exhausted. It was easier for us because at least Bailey had me to help out with a lot of this. But even if you are alone, do your best. Before each appointment, plan out questions and write them in your notebook. Take the notebook with you to appointments and fill it out as you go. Try not to go to appointments alone if you possibly can. A second person can really help ensure that nothing is glossed over. You kind of need an advocate. My role at appointments is generally just to kind of sit and watch. Bailey handles everything herself, but I jump in if she misses something or if something doesn't make sense to me. It's really helpful to have someone who can just kind of pay attention without participating so they can spot issues that wouldn't come up naturally if you're in the flow of conversation. The outcome of all our phone calls and research was an appointment at MD Anderson on May 9th, not even 2 full weeks after the initial scan. We were very fortunate that our care team worked us in so fast. We checked into a hotel in Houston on the 7th. A friend, my mother, and my brother took turns watching Radagast in our house. Bailey's parents both traveled to Houston to support us. During that time, Bailey's symptoms grew dramatically worse. It's like she hit a threshold after which just everything blew at once. And it was absolutely terrifying to just sit around waiting, not doing anything. I've heard stories of people going from diagnosis to treatment in just a week or two. For us, it took a month to the day to go from that official diagnosis to treatment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We had appointments to meet with Bailey's prospective team at MD Anderson on May 9th. We reserved a flight in a hotel and we were ready to go. We flew out on the 7th and we just had to wait until Tuesday for the appointments to start. But we didn't actually get to those appointments. We had actually already gone to the ER a couple of times for high blood pressure, and this happened again the day right before our appointments. Thankfully, we were already in Houston and MD Anderson has a dedicated ER called the Acute Cancer Care Center. After waiting in line for a good hour or 2 or 3 or whatever it was, they took her vitals and found that her BP was something like, I swear it was 200 over 120 or something. The highest I have written down is 181 over 111, but I am almost 100% sure that their first reading there was 200 over something in the like 120s range. Her BP was so high that they actually immediately admitted her and brought her in for a CT of her brain in order to make sure that she didn't have any bleeds starting, which was actually inconclusive and showed something. So we had an MRI, which thankfully showed there wasn't actually anything there. The CT was just blurry or something. I don't know how CTs work, but in any case, the MRI said that she was totally fine. So, and I need to stress, this happened very quickly. We got in, we had just flown in the day beforehand. We went to the cancer care center. We waited around for a while. They finally saw her. They took the blood pressure. And then it was just a whirlwind of them wheeling her around on a bed to different rooms while I just kind of followed along and tried to keep her morale up. Having her admitted actually kind of turned out to our benefit a little bit, as it actually made it really easy to get all of her labs and all the early conversations taken care of, as everyone just came by our room. We didn't actually have to go around hunting for different offices. We confirmed what we already knew and collected a ton more labs, and then we met with the team. So talking with the cancer team is actually really, really tricky, as they simply can't answer the questions you really want to ask. Is she going to be okay? What are the odds of a cure? How long will literally any part of this take? Something that's really hard to wrap your mind around as a patient is the notion that, yes, there is some statistical data regarding your cancer, even if it's a rare one. No, it is not going to be particularly useful to you as a gauge for what is going to happen. It's only really useful to professionals who have the training to understand what's relevant, what isn't, and to know which questions are actually important and which ones are kind of just emotional. There are too many variables. Knowing whether anyone has survived, that it's possible, is a useful thing. There is hope. Knowing which of two options worked better for people in a similar circumstance, again, very, very useful. Am I going to make it? I don't know. Our team is very, very good, and they were very patient and understanding with our questions. We asked whether there's any chance of a cure, but of course they can't answer that. What they did say was that at that stage, we were pursuing life extension, not a cure, which was devastating to hear, but I appreciate just the brutal honesty. Now, they had seen people come in roughly the same state as Bailey, who 10 years later were cancer-free. So there was still hope, but it was not the norm. I tried to press for how often does that happen, and the closest I got was sort of a shrug and I don't know, maybe 1 in 100. Though, for a cancer this rare, it's really hard to have any real data on that. More significantly, Bailey is not the median ACC patient. She's decades younger than average. She doesn't smoke, and she was perfectly happy to quit alcohol altogether. Though there's actually a great growing market in zero alcohol beer, wine, and liquor that we've been trying lately. So if you have to quit drinking, this is real, but she has a bottle of fake bourbon downstairs that she's probably going to actually give it a try tonight. She exercises regularly. Again, cardio, strength, high-intensity interval training, etc. She eats a plant-based diet, which was recommended by literally every cancer dietitian we have talked to. Her age alone may have saved her from complications due to her blood pressure. This cancer is simply too rare to ask. Of female patients younger than 35 with good nutrition and exercise, what are the odds of a cure? I'm not sure that even 10 people have fit these parameters in the past few years, since the current treatment plan hit the market. As I said before, Bailey is a fighter, and I am, not to boast, this is just true, an extremely supportive husband who just happens to not have any other pressing responsibilities right now. So I'm free to take over all of our chores, cook healthy meals, encourage her to work out when she's not feeling it, read to her when she's scared, double check medication when she's too distracted, drive her to appointments, and be affectionate when she's mourning the loss of control over her body and appearance. For a long while, our goal was to get her into that 1 in 100. Every time something seemed too difficult, I'd remind her that this was a situation, this was a choice in which some people, many people, would have not done the right thing. But we're going to be in that top 1%, so we're going to do the right thing. We would do every single thing right. And maybe what we do isn't going to matter, but if it does matter, then she's going to be perfectly fine. We drew inspiration from fantasy heroes who, after all, very rarely know that they're going to succeed, but do their best anyways. I often noted that, like Samwise, I can't carry her cancer or her treatment for her, but I can carry her. We both, independently, thought back to Frodo telling Gandalf, "I wish it need not have happened in my time." And Gandalf's response, "So do I, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." At this stage, we had a great deal of uncertainty regarding what would happen next. MD Anderson seemed like the best place to be, but could we just fly out for care while living in our nice new house with our adorable puppy in Seattle? Could we get treatment locally at Fred Hutch, but coordinated by MD Anderson? There was a while there where we were looking into just moving to Houston, maybe renting out our Seattle home and buying a cheap place as close to MD Anderson as we could afford. A huge question, which we still haven't actually fully figured out, is whether I need to go back to work. We have good insurance, a house, healthy savings, so we're really very fortunate financially speaking. But it's still really stressful to have to consider these practical concerns on top of everything else. Like, even for people that are financially well off, we have had, several, 5, 6 flights, a few of them with almost no notice. A couple of them we went first class because we were so worried about her getting sick if she was in a too crowded area, and we just want to make sure she had enough leg room to stretch out and not have a blood clot or something. Like I saved up a lot of money, but I did not have this in my life plan when I retired at the age of whatever I was. I'm 34 now, so a couple years ago, 32. I don't know. I poured this a little heavy. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Fortunately, meeting with the team started to answer some questions for us, though things were still very much up in the air. First off, they had to collect a ton of labs to see what we were actually dealing with and to get the symptoms under control. Getting those symptoms managed is actually something we didn't really appreciate at the time. It kind of felt like every moment spent waiting to start treatment was a waste, but what I understand now is that cancer treatment is very, very rough, and you really need to be as stable as possible before beginning. So getting the symptoms managed is step one of going on to chemo. It isn't a waste of time to get the blood pressure into a normal range, get the swelling down, nail down whatever has to be nailed down before you add in chemotherapy. That is part of chemotherapy, is preparing for chemotherapy. So I could say that it was a full month between the diagnosis and chemotherapy, but it wasn't a month between diagnosis and beginning treatment. And that does make a difference, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. So with the labs collected and our team assembled, we discussed the plan. Mitotane, a derivative of DDT, would be one of our main long-term drugs. It inhibits cortisol production and, at high doses, attacks adrenal tissue. Not really enough to fight cancer by itself, but it manages symptoms and helps beat up the tumors a little bit, so it's a really important drug for adrenal cancer. It has also just a ton of really terrifying side effects, but that's kind of how cancer meds work. And I'm not really sure she's ever going to be able to stop taking that particular drug. They are giant pills. She has to take a ton of them in the morning and evening, and she has informed me that they are very, very sharp. She really didn't have that many troubles with vomiting on chemotherapy. One of the times she vomited was just because one of the goddamn Mitotane pills got stuck in her throat, and that one was actually full-on projectile. That was a spectacle. So if whoever shapes Mitotane pills is watching this, just like sand the edges, maybe. Do they have to be sharp in order to work? In any case, I can't even touch them without risking side effects. And the side effects, again, pretty bad. She's doing relatively well, all considering, but they can be quite bad. But the first major short-term treatment, not the Mitotane, which is going to be a very long-term one, but the first major short-term one was a form of traditional chemotherapy called EDP, etoposide, doxorubicin, and cisplatin. There are a lot of types of chemotherapy. Again, Mitotane is a form of oral chemotherapy, but EDP is the sort of chemo you're thinking of when you hear chemo. It causes hair loss, nausea, other GI upset, rashes, and a host of other issues. This course can cause leukemia by itself. The treatment permanently lowers red and white blood cell counts. They do bounce back a little bit, and we have already seen some of this. So if you finish a course of EDP chemotherapy and you see your red blood cells and your white blood cells are at a certain level, they will probably creep up from that, but they're not going to get back to where they were. These aren't pills, they're infusions, so they have to be done at a hospital or an infusion center. And also, fun tip, insurance companies sometimes bill meds differently depending on whether they're administered in an infusion center or through the pharmacy. We actually came very close to having a delay once because someone had filed it wrong. And the only reason we didn't have a delay is because I proactively called just to make sure we were all good, a thing I learned very early on that you have to do with medicine like this. And we discovered the issue and were able to get rerouted to the proper channels. For our particular insurance, if it is administered in the hospital, it's through medicine. If it's through the pharmacy, then it's pharmacy. But that is not necessarily consistent across all hospitals. There might be hospitals where chemotherapy is still through pharmacy, even if you're getting it as an infusion. I do not know. I'm not an expert on this. I don't know. There is an expert on every single form of insurance and hospital policy. So you're just going to have to call everybody all the time. I don't have a better answer than that. Now, some infusions can be done via IV, but others require a port or a PICC line. either because they need to be administered faster than IV can go, or because the meds will actually melt your skin if they leak. A PICC, peripherally inserted central catheter, is easier to install than a port, as it's basically just kind of a long-term IV that they sort of just snake up through like your arm and up into your, kind of by your heart. I think they can do it through the thigh too, but ours have always been through the arm. There's very little risk of infection, but you do need to flush it regularly. You have to get a saline syringe at home. You get a pack of them, you screw onto the end, and you have to flush it through. When we tried it, it didn't work. I'll get into that later. And there's a little bit of risk of infection, but compared to a port, it's less invasive. Now, a port is a little access point on the chest with tubes going near the heart. You could have it really probably anywhere. Bailey's had 2. Again, I'll get into it later. But it's like a little lump in here that then when they give you your medicine, they just get a little needle and they poke it into the port. And it's actually a lot more convenient than either a PICC or an IV. So if they want to do a port, I know it's scary because they have to implant it surgically. It's actually under your skin. Once you have it, it is way less gross and creepy than having a PICC line or an IV. Also, a lot of hospitals won't even necessarily do all chemo drugs through IV. Doxorubicin in particular really is bad for the skin if it touches your skin at all. MD Anderson let us do it by IV for our first time because we had such a time crunch. But Fred Hutch, for example, I think wouldn't do it. Maybe they would under some circumstances, but certainly for us, they want us to either have a PICC or a port for it. So sometimes you just have to have one. And honestly, IVs suck. Bailey actually has some permanent scarring in her veins because of a potassium IV that was a little bit too high. And when we first started this, she was actually really squigged out by medical devices and stuff. The idea of having a port or a PICC would have really freaked her out. She still hates it. After that potassium IV, she's very happy having a port. So if you're in this situation and you're worried about getting a port, I promise you, the port will be better than an IV or a PICC line, even if something goes wrong, which again, I'm skipping ahead. Treatment courses like this are broken up into infusion cycles. For us, each cycle was 3 weeks. It can be 4 weeks for people in worse health, maybe even longer. It's probably different for different chemo treatments. Again, there's so much here, I can't begin to explain all of it. For us, it was 3 weeks. Now that's 3 weeks between the first day of infusions, not 3 weeks between infusions. So for us, this meant 4 days of infusions, 17 days off, then more infusions. Day 1 was just doxorubicin, which is very, very red. This is a drug that, again, normally requires a PICC or a port. Again, we did the first one through IV. In general, with chemotherapy, you kind of just need to get used to the idea that the people administering the meds are going to be completely covered in protective gear so that they don't even spill a drop on them. I think I was told as a caregiver that I have to be careful touching even her laundry and stuff like that, which, like, be real. I don't wear gloves every time I pick up her laundry. It's fine. I haven't had any side effects that I've noticed. But, you know, yeah, it's too dangerous for her. I can't even touch her laundry, but, you know, by all means, cram it into Bailey by the bag. You really can't ignore the fact that, unlike most meds we take, chemotherapy is meant specifically to kill human tissues. They kill some cells quicker than other cells, but it's definitely poison. Doxorubicin established that real quick for us, just by its color, if nothing else. Fortunately, it's actually a really quick infusion for us. It was only about 15 minutes. It was a very small bag compared to the other ones. Now, day 2 is etoposide, which takes an hour or two, but that's the only med we have on day 2, so day 2 winds up actually still being pretty quick. Days 3 and 4 were cisplatin, hydration, and more etoposide, and those were some long days. Cisplatin really hits the kidneys hard, so you have to get a lot of fluids before and after it. The whole process for us took something like 8 hours, sometimes longer. There were a couple days where we got up and drove at like 6:30, got there at around 8, got checked in, started meds, and didn't even leave the hospital until like 7:30. These are some long infusion days. We actually lucked out that our infusion center had mostly private rooms, and like Fred Hutch is an excellent center. If you're in the greater Seattle area, Fred Hutch is excellent. Go there for your infusions if you need to. I've heard about other infusion centers where everybody's kind of just in line with a little curtain in between. Fred Hutch is actually pretty comfy, all considering. I'm actually describing the usual I'm actually describing the usual schedule here and realizing that I jumped a little bit ahead because, again, that first infusion to MD Anderson via IV was a little bit different. IV is a little bit of a lower pressure, so it took much longer. MD Anderson also has different standards for hydration, so we got a lot of fluids. She was basically on IV something like, I want to say 16 to 18 hours a day while she was admitted for her treatment there. It was pretty rough. Anyways, the initial plan was to try EDP plus mitotane for 3 cycles, collect new scans and labs, then reevaluate, with the rough long-term goal of doing EDP as long as Bailey was tolerating it and getting decent results, but not more than 6 cycles, as this is a very harsh treatment with permanent side effects. Then, assuming the treatment had had success, we would start immunotherapy. We might have done it either way. I don't know. That's just how they explained it. We would do EDP and then immunotherapy. We were told very early on that if we were going to see a miracle, we wouldn't see it during EDP, we'd see it during immunotherapy. Ideally, we would eventually get to a point where the liver tumors were somewhat smaller and more stable, that we could kind of put those on the back burner for a little while, and no other metastases would appear, and we would be able to get her condition into a stable enough state that we could surgically remove the primary tumor and maybe some of the larger liver ones, depending on what's going on. But at this stage of the plan, it was all very loose. We were kind of just doing EDP and seeing what happens. Now, fortunately, we were able to coordinate care with Fred Hutch. So we've been able to do all of our infusions, except for that first one, in Seattle, and we fly back to Houston just for check-ins, which are every few months. Yes, it's very expensive and it's very frustrating to constantly be flying back to Houston, but it is nice to be able to stay at home and just get the infusions nearby. It's we're not in we're in the greater Seattle area. We're still like an hour drive out from Seattle, so we're not right there, but it's a hell of a lot easier than having to move to Houston. So again, for that first infusion, we started at MD Anderson. The infusion center was so backed up that they just admitted her directly into the hospital. And we started the first day of EDP on May 27th, which, recall, is exactly 1 month later than the first scan. These first few weeks in Houston were just insane. It's hard to even wrap my mind around it just months afterwards. Bailey spent around half of her time there in the hospital. I tried my hardest not to leave her side, even for a moment. Basically living in this one uncomfortable, cramped chair in her very tiny, uncomfortable room. Luckily, Last Echo of the Lord of the Bells came out during this time, so I spent a lot of the time reading Mage Errant to Bailey while she suffered through all the tests and infusions and just sitting around waiting. A couple of times I did just have to sleep in a real bed. I really wanted to stay with her every single second, but I could not sleep in that damn chair, and I was just starting to go out of my mind after days without a minute of sleep. So I finally went back to the hotel, leaving her parents to watch over her. I don't think she was actually alone. If she was, it was for only like 5 minutes. Like, we did everything we could to make sure she was not alone at all. I'm honestly not sure I've ever been as tired as that. I could not sleep in the chair. I distinctly remember trying to drive back to the hotel one night and being so tired that I swear I think I just drove down the middle of the street or near to it. I had no idea what was going around me. I should not have been driving. I think that it was too late for the shuttle, so I had to. I was so tired. It was either drive to the hotel or fall asleep, just like on the floor in the lobby of the hospital. It was rough. I also completely forgot which parking lot I parked at when I came back, so I was still tired. I didn't even get like a full sleep. So when I had to find the car, I actually had to walk around to every single parking lot around the hospital. There's like 7 parking lots. I think I had to go to 4 before I found it. It's very hot in Houston. It's very uncomfortable. It was not a fun trip for any reason. Like, even aside from the cancer, it was not a fun trip. We also didn't know how long this was going to take, so we had to keep extending the hotel reservation. And for some reason, they couldn't just leave us in the same damn room. So on at least 2, maybe 3 occasions, I had to grab all of our stuff and move it between rooms in the hotel really quickly and then run back to the hospital. Because again, for most of this time, Bailey was not in the hotel. She did get a little bit of time in between some of the appointments and the treatment where we actually did do a little bit of sightseeing. We went to the Natural Science Museum and the Space Center. But honestly, for me, the highlight was easily the Hobbit Cafe. If you're ever around the Texas Medical Center, the Hobbit Cafe has some of the best vegetarian food. It is a great ambiance. We bought a couple of shirts. We got a glass. It's a great place. Really, really recommend it. It was super fun going there. We've gone there, I think, almost every time we've gone back to Houston. I think we missed it once because we were too busy. But we usually go back to the Hobbit Cafe. It's great. Get the Valinor. It's just so many delicious roasted vegetables. I really like it. But if you ever find yourself stuck in a hospital for a long while, one tip I would give you is to wear something that you can wrap around yourself in case you do need to sleep on a dirty surface, like a bench or something. You really, really don't want to bring an infection back to somebody going through chemotherapy or immunotherapy. It's really important to be careful. I found a lawn hoodie was perfect, like a really, really long, like oversized hoodie. Something that you can close around your face so that if you roll around in your sleep, you don't wind up waking up with like your lips touching like a dirty hospital seat. Something you can wrap around yourself if it's cold. You basically just want a wearable blanket. You want like a cloak. Also be aware that hospital food isn't always great on fiber and you're not going to be moving around a lot. So grab some vegetables or some fiber whenever you can. It will make your stay easier. If you're a vegetarian stuck in a hospital in Houston, good luck. There's actually a really excellent vegetarian food scene in the Texas Medical Center area. It's actually surprisingly much, much better than that in the greater Seattle area. But the hospital cafeteria had like nothing that didn't have meat in it. I basically just lived off of Lenny and Larry's complete cookies, which have the right blend of fiber and protein for me. They're actually great. That's my new go-to for going to the airport. Best of all, it's not just the nutrition. It's that you can very easily open the package and eat it without touching it. So if your hands are gross, you can still eat it, which I know seems really mundane, like calling out foods you can eat without touching it with your hands here, but it's actually really important to keep yourself healthy. It's not even for you as a caregiver. It's also to avoid bringing something back to the patient. So eating well, sleeping, avoiding illness, getting exercise, all that stuff. You have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of them and so that you don't get sick and then get them sick too. Like it's not about just toughing it out. It's about making the right rational decisions. And sometimes that means caring about what kind of packaging your food is in. All right, so EDP wasn't a ton of fun. As soon as Bailey's hair started falling out, we shaved her head. Honestly, I'm not going to post a picture. I know she wouldn't want me to. She really pulls it off surprisingly well. Like if I ever lose my hair, I'm not going to look half that good. Like Bailey actually does pull off being bald really shockingly well. But nobody can pull off patchy chemo hair. So if you are on chemo and you start losing your hair, just shave it off. I have seen other people at some of these hospitals that decided to kind of just let it go. You will look better bald. People can pull off, even women, even young women, you can pull off being bald. I have seen many bald women in the last 8 months, however long it's been, and a number of them actually pulled it off really surprisingly well. And you can get really pretty headscarves and stuff too. They actually really do look very nice. It's easier to pull off than you would think. I'm not trying to like belittle it here. I know it's very frustrating. I know it must be very, very upsetting, especially if you're a woman and you didn't have the expectation that when you get older, you might just lose your hair. I'm sure that's very challenging, but honestly, I'm telling you, there's a lot of stuff you can do. You can also get wigs and you can reimburse them on some insurance plans as a cranial prosthetic. So look into that. There's some very nice human hair wigs, but they're also really uncomfortable. So get some head wraps too. So etoposide, doxorubicin, and cisplatin all cause nausea, as does mitotane, as does basically every single cancer medicine. But cisplatin is the one that we definitely saw the most impact from. She really only vomited something like, I think 5 times over all of treatment, but she was nauseous really often. Fortunately, the nausea meds available for cancer patients have improved dramatically over the past few decades. So she wasn't anywhere near as sick as I had expected based on stories from older friends, family, or just from TV. Zofran and Compazine are both fantastic drugs. Zofran even comes in a dissolvable tablet in case you're too nauseous to swallow anything. But the real winner for us has been olanzapine, one that we can just take once a day. It's been very good. As I mentioned before, it's not just about the actual chemo drugs. A big part of managing cancer is managing the symptoms. It's not just about how you feel. It's about making sure that your body is stable enough to handle the treatment. So that's what a lot of our early discussions with our team were about. The MyChart app that we were able to use for our system made communication really easy, allowing us to coordinate discussions and check results from multiple hospitals in one single app. It took quite a while to get all the meds figured out, and honestly, it's still a moving target. We're constantly changing things. That's kind of the nature of cancer, is to keep changing, either getting worse or better or just different. For managing meds, I would strongly recommend getting a dedicated bag to carry everything and reserving a couple of drawers somewhere in your home for storing everything that doesn't fit in the bag. I don't even remember how many pills she was taking at the worst, but I know it was well over 50 in a single day. I think she was actually taking more than 30 just in the morning for a while there, and she's still pretty close to that. We actually use a chart in Google Docs to track every single pill she takes, so we know exactly when each dose is taken. Do not try to keep it all in your head. You're gonna make mistakes. We have alarms on our watches and stuff like that. It is too easy when you have, 40 pills that you're taking to take a bunch of them right and then afterwards say, oh, did I take that one? Or, oh, I had to go get a new bottle because the other one was empty and then I got distracted and lost my place. Just have a spreadsheet up, take a pill, enter it, take a pill, enter it. It takes an extra minute. It is worth the time. It's very easy to do. You don't need a laptop or anything. You can do it right on your phone. It's really, really important to do this. If you have somebody else that can help you, then they can do that for you. That's often what we'll do, is Bailey will take her meds and I will stand nearby and enter all the times for it. Track as needed drugs like this too, so you don't overdose. Like if you have to take a Zofran, track when you took the Zofran so you know when you can take another Zofran. It makes it very easy, for example, if you're trying to balance two drugs like Zofran and Compazine, to say, well, I took a Zofran at 11, so I'm going to take a Compazine at, 2, because then I can have another Zofran at, 3, and we can stagger them. The bookkeeping is annoying. It really, really is worth it. It also is really nice to be able to know which days you needed as needed meds, because then when you're talking to your team, you might be able to notice patterns. For example, which days did you need nausea meds for? Was there a certain pattern to this? Is it always after a certain period of time? Is it getting worse over time or getting better over time? This is all important data for figuring things out. We also record all of Bailey's blood pressures. We used her notebook for this at first, like her physical notebook, but she's actually been really happy with the Garmin app lately. You don't actually need the Garmin blood pressure cuff. You can just enter it manually. If you get a blood pressure monitor, take it with you to an appointment so you can calibrate it against what the hospital has. And also try to take readings correctly, which the current recommendation is that the patient should be lying down, relaxed, legs uncrossed, otherwise unengaged. Give them time for a couple of deep breaths and some soothing thoughts. We use Chronometer to track food and Garmin to track weight and exercise. Get a good kitchen scale for measuring portions. If you ever find yourself in this situation, set up a call with a cancer dietitian who can give you tips on your particular cancer. For us, we mostly focused on reducing sodium to help with the blood pressure and supporting the immune system by getting a variety of different colors of food and by getting prebiotics. Which, honestly, the color system, it sounds really goofy. It's not a bad heuristic for getting a good variety of foods. Just look at whatever color the food is and get all the colors. We had a printout on our fridge for a while there before we kind of got used to it. A lot of these diet things, there's a lot of crazy cancer diets out there. Do your own research, but for whatever it's worth, we don't have meat, generally speaking. She occasionally has chicken noodle soup when her stomach needs something like that, but we generally don't do meat, and we aim for high protein, and we aim for hitting every broad color of food every day if possible. And we try to have a fair bit of either yogurt or kombucha every single day for some kind of probiotic. I'll also mention that we're vegetarian, but Bailey is able to routinely get well over 100 grams of protein without going above her calorie goals or having any pre-packaged protein supplements or anything like that. Like, we occasionally use whey protein powder, but even without that, peanut butter, tofu, cheese, There are plenty of yogurt, cottage cheese. There's plenty of really good ways as a vegetarian to get lots of protein. We've talked to a number of dietitians at this point. One question we had early on is whether she should go back to eating meat. Every single dietitian we have talked to that is aware of her medical history and her cancer has told us no, plant-based is the recommendation. But obviously for your cancer, ask your team. One other thing I feel like I should mention is medical marijuana. Now, we're in Washington where recreational marijuana is easily available, so a medical card basically just gets you a small discount. But I will say that when her nausea was at its absolute worst, just one quick puff was more powerful than Zofran or Compazine. It worked very quickly. Edibles, kind of counterproductive actually. Just a little tiny puff off of a joint or a pipe really helped a lot. It was very useful as long as she didn't start coughing, which then became counterproductive. So you kind of have to be careful with that. Now, once we started immunotherapy, we did see some kind of inconsistent research showing that marijuana might be contraindicated with immunotherapy results. So she completely quit for immunotherapy. I don't know if that's the correct thing to do. It's what we're doing to be extra safe. But during chemotherapy, it occasionally was the only thing that let her take her pills, which, you know, regardless of your feelings on it, if she can't take her pills, we need to do what we need to do. And we found just a quick puff or two off of a joint was enough to really help her out. Anyways, I'm kind of skipping ahead again. So our first 3 cycles went about as well as we could hope for. It's terrifying just taking the meds and hoping that they're working. There's really no good way to tell whether they have any effect, and I couldn't help but try to find clues wherever I could, tracking changes in blood pressure, in cortisol, in swelling, in mood. Bailey was actually able to keep up with work pretty well through most of this, but she also works as a software engineer from home. I kind of doubt that she could have physically gone into the office every day, and certainly not if she hadn't had a desk job. She certainly couldn't have driven herself either, as a lot of cancer drugs cause random bouts of vertigo, and she has had these symptoms. And it's very hit or miss. Some days she doesn't, some days she does. So the idea of saying, oh, I feel all right now, when it comes, it kind of comes out of nowhere. So if she was by herself, she would have to drive. I mean, if you can't work from home and you can't get out of work, then at some point you just have to do what you need to do. My mom's a cancer survivor, and when I was a kid and she had cancer, we were not anywhere near as fortunate as Bailey and the two of us are now in terms of work, finance, and support. She was a single mom. I was too preoccupied with school to be much help. My little brother really was the only one that was able to dedicate a lot of his time to helping her, and he couldn't even drive. So she kind of had to do whatever she had to do. But if you can swing it, you know, having a partner drive you is really useful. So we returned to MD Anderson in July, getting new scans on the 17th and meeting with the team the next day. We had to go to a building off campus for the scans due to scheduling, and it's a real thing. The waiting room had a bunch of fish tanks that were all filled with dead fish, which I had to try very hard not to read as a bad omen, even though as far as bad omens go, I don't know how you top the building is filled with dead fish in elaborate tanks on display. The scans showed that the tumors were mostly stable. The primary mass was very slightly smaller, while the liver tumors varied, with some a little bit smaller, some a little bit larger, others unchanged. We decided to keep going for 2 more cycles. When we got back to Seattle, we ran into a whole bunch of problems with our port. Ports are generally pretty durable, lasting for several years without any issues. Bailey started to feel wrong, so we had it removed under suspicion of infection. Her first port was placed on June 14th, and we had it removed on August 1st. This upgraded me from caregiver to wound nurse, as I had to clean and pack the wound every day until it healed. Fun thing about chemotherapy, it dramatically slows down the healing process, so it took several weeks for this little tiny hole to heal. To start our next cycle on time, Bailey had a PICC line inserted. We tried to just keep it between infusions, but the very first time we tried to flush it at home, it got stuck. Apparently it had been inserted too deep and was fluttering around in her heart, which also felt weird, and it kept getting stuck to the side of the wall so that you couldn't push anything through it. So we had it removed, which is thankfully much quicker and easier than having a port removed. With a PICC line, they kind of just yank it out of you. With a port, it's a surgical procedure. As the port still hadn't healed in time for our 5th cycle, we had to put in yet another PICC line, which in that case, we just elected to have ripped out regardless of any other issues on the last day of the infusion because we just didn't even want to deal with it at that point. I am honestly not sure what we could have done to prevent the first port from getting infected. We did everything we could. She covered it in the shower. We tried to be careful around the area. She didn't get dirty or anything. Sometimes you're just unlucky. All the bandages and cleaning solutions are really hard on the skin, and chemo can also cause skin sensitivity. So when taking care of the port wound, we actually struggled with rashes quite a bit. The best trick we found for fixing rashes was colloidal oatmeal baths. It's really relatively cheap and it works astoundingly well, far better than any more complex things that we tried. We also cut out fabric softener just to try. Lubriderm has been our lotion of choice. CeraVe is also good, but the smell was really too strong for Bailey during EDP, so Lubriderm it is. So ports, picks, and IVs require a lot of gauze and bandages. We always ask for the sensitive skin options, but honestly, I am not sure that helped. Really, you need to make sure that the cleaning solution is entirely dry before applying the covering. Don't use alcohol to sanitize if you can help it, as it dries out the skin. For IVs, if they can just use a bit of tape and some gauze instead of the full wrap, the tape and gauze we found was tolerated much better. I found that at home as well, I had much better luck using gauze and tape than I did with large bandages and pads. For the tape, I tried several types. The one I prefer, I can't find the name for it. A nurse handed it to me once. It's blue and kind of gooey. It almost feels like fruit by the foot. If anyone knows what it's called, put it in a comment. It's not the normal, like the kind of fabric-y tape. It looks like fruit by the foot. You can stretch it. It tears kind of awkwardly. It's not that sticky, but it was sticky enough to keep everything on. We have a bunch of it still, so I don't need to buy more, but it was great. It was the only thing we found that didn't make her break out in rashes. And I do know that this is really excessively in-depth for people that are kind of just here for the drama, but I could have really used this information a few months ago. And I also think just as a narrative, this kind of illustrates just how massively complex everything to do with cancer is. I'm glossing over most of the details. These are just the highlights. There is so much stuff. I have had to figure out more just stuff in the last year than I have at every job I've ever had put together. It's absolutely insane how much stuff you have to figure out with this. It's so damn complicated. The only thing that makes me feel better about it is the idea that this complication, the fact that we're getting through this complication, we are heading towards that top 1%. Whether that's rational or not, I honestly don't know. Don't tell me if I'm wrong. It helps me feel better about it. Like, I'm not even going to go into all the pharmacy problems we had. I honestly don't know how anyone manages to survive cancer of any type without a dedicated caregiver. For a lot of this time period, I was basically spending every waking minute doing something to help manage Bailey's cancer. And she was well enough to actually do a fair bit of it on her own as well. There just aren't enough hours in a day to exercise, cook, sleep, drive to appointments, and spend seriously like 10 hours on the phone with Walgreens in a single week. So as we planned, we returned to MD Anderson for new scans on September 11th. They took her back for the scans by herself, leaving me in the waiting room. Now by this point, I knew around how long all of her labs take, so I knew that it was taking too long. I don't know if you've ever been in a hospital waiting for someone and realized that it's been too long, but there's really not a lot you can do about it. You can ask at the counter, but they're probably not going to be able to give you any useful information. And if you push too hard, you just wind up making a scene. So I just sat as patiently as I could, trying not to get too worried, when finally someone came out and started walking in my direction. Now, of course, in the moment, I assumed they were walking for someone else because Bailey walks out of the scans on her own. So why would he be coming for me? But then he walked right up to me and explained that they had found a pulmonary embolism. A specialist had been called to decide what to do, and they were considering moving her to the ER. Now, I really wish, for the sake of the story, that I could remember exactly what he said, the way he told me, because I distinctly remember, even in the moment, finding it kind of humorous how terribly he handled it. I'm pretty sure the words he used were, "Your wife is currently stable, but we found something on the scan. I'm taking you back to be with her." When I got back there, she was trying very hard to keep calm, as panicking would just exacerbate the situation. So after what was either a minute or two or like 20 years, I honestly don't know how long we were in there, someone finally showed up, took a look at it, said, it's kind of a little embolism, and we had an appointment with the primary team the next morning anyway, so we just let it go. And then when we talked to our primary team, they said that the solution to this is just tons of blood thinners from now on, not to fix this embolism, which was small enough not to be a major issue, but to prevent the next embolism from killing her, which at this point wasn't even really that scary compared to everything else going on. The actual results of the scan on her cancer were similar to the last trip. Some shrinkage, but the overall situation was mostly just stable, with some areas even maybe being debatably a little bit bigger. At the time, this really felt like bad news. The treatment only bought us meager months. Like, we were going through all of this misery. She was doing these awful treatments, feeling so sick, just to bide some time, after which we would go back to the same 6 months to a couple of year estimate we had when we started all this? Like, was this even worth it? Weren't we just delaying the inevitable and putting Bailey through a lot of pain along the way? The plan was mostly unchanged. We would do one more cycle of EDP, bringing us to 6 total, and then move on to immunotherapy. I don't think I really grokked, despite our team's best efforts to explain it to me, that the goal of EDP was to prepare us for immunotherapy, not to kill the cancer by itself. So these results really weren't bad. We simply hadn't gotten to the phase of treatment where we would see whether things would actually work out for us. For the most part, Bailey really tolerated EDP fairly well compared to other people. She was exhausted, nauseous, and suffered plenty of uncomfortable side effects, but it really wasn't until the last couple of rounds that her blood counts dipped low enough to be obvious. She kept going on races throughout all of the treatment. One perk of cancer for her is that I now run with her on every race rather than just once in a while. We ran the Furry 5K with Radagast in June, the Firecracker 4 Mile in July, the Fred Hutch Obliteride in August, Beat the Blurch in September, Stein Dash and Haunted Hustle in October, and the Turkey Trot in November. We're doing the Disney Princess 5K next month. I wouldn't say that any of these races were easy with cancer. Bailey has run a marathon. She used to run 10K for a normal weekday workout. Her favorite distance, a thing that she has, is a half marathon. With cancer, we've been running 5Ks for the most part. From my perspective, I think it's incredible that she's running races at all. Her times really aren't even that bad, like not compared to an average person. But they were definitely worse than what she used to have, and they definitely got worse the more cycles we had in. Now, in January 2024, she's starting to see some slow improvements, but the Stein Dash and Haunted Hustle, just after cycle 6, were rough. We had to walk a good third, maybe even half of those races. It's really, really hard to comfort someone in a situation like this. Again, from where I'm sitting, the fact that she was still running races with stage 4 adrenal cancer while on chemotherapy was just crazy. We weren't even the slowest people there. We passed plenty of people who presumably did not have cancer and weren't on chemotherapy. But to her, she just saw her time getting worse and worse, and there wasn't anything she could do about it. I think my pointing out that all considering a 50-minute 5K is really something to be proud of really just pissed her off, as she's used to times well below half an hour. As a partner and caregiver, you need to keep offering support, but sometimes there really just is nothing you can say. But, I mean, for the Haunted Hustle, we were in full costumes and looking at Halloween decorations. Nobody there was going for a PR. It really wasn't that bad. But anyways, the last EDP infusion was September 14th through the 17th. We started immunotherapy on October 11th, but let's get more into that. Like chemotherapy, there are multiple types of immunotherapy. Bailey's on pembrolizumab, which sounds kind of like a fancy term for Mercutio's speech about Queen Mab to me, but it's an immune checkpoint inhibitor. Basically, your cells and immune system have just a ton of complex stuff going on. I only took a single semester of zoology in college, so I am well out of my depth here, but Your body has protections in place to cut back on friendly fire from your immune system. And one of these systems is called Programmed Cell Death Protein 1, or PD-1. PD-1 is a protein present in immune T and B cells that serves as a checkpoint to keep these immune cells from targeting healthy cells for destruction. For some cancers, PD-1 is one of the mechanisms that allows for cancer cells to cheat death. As I understand it, cancer is kind of like a plane crash, and that multiple things need to go wrong in parallel in order to thwart all the protective measures in place. So the hope with Pembro is that unshackling the T and B cells just a little bit will help the body recognize the tumors and deal with them. But PD-1 isn't present in your body for no reason. It's to prevent autoimmune destruction of healthy cells. So Pembro has loads of side effects, some of which can be so severe that you actually have to stop treatment. Cancer is bad, but if your immune system decides that without PD-1 in the way, your brain is looking pretty sus, then we're gonna have a problem. Now, I would like these videos to be broadly applicable, so I'm gonna do my best to squash the urge to work on a clumsy left-equipable cops here, but it does write itself. We've been told that, generally speaking, patients tend to tolerate Pembro much better than EDP. I actually have to wonder whether Bailey's age and overall health are why this was not the case for us. The nausea got a little bit better, and the Pembro infusions are much easier, just 1 day per cycle, and it only takes a couple of hours total, including the setup. But overall, Pembro was much harder for Bailey than EDP. For the first couple of cycles, she had a horrible rash that covered pretty much her entire body. Those Avena oatmeal baths and sleeping with gloves coated with Vaseline helped immensely, but it just looked so uncomfortable. More than that, she was absolutely exhausted. Bailey managed to work through most of EDP, only taking the occasional day or afternoon off. Her first immunotherapy infusion was on October 11th, and by the end of the month, she clearly needed more rest, so she took November and December as med leave. For the first couple of cycles, she basically just slept. She'd wake up to take her meds, have some food, then go back to sleep. I think she was actually sleeping something like 18 hours per day for a while there. She still managed to work out a few times per week, but she barely even had time to just sit up and watch some TV with me. It feels really whiny to say this, given just how harrowing Bailey's situation was, but as a caregiver, it was actually really lonely. Now, I have friends and family who have wanted to support me. If anything, I was ignoring their phone calls because I just felt too exhausted to be social with anyone else. But Bailey was too exhausted to do anything with me. So for those weeks where she slept, I basically just did housework. I retiled a shower that had started to leak. I cleaned the yard. I caulked basically everything in the house that looked like maybe it could be recaulked. I created a digital photo library for us of all of our family photos and then tagged every single image in it. There are tens of thousands of them. It probably took 200 hours. I did it in like 2 months. Anytime she was awake, I doted on her as much as I could, cooking whatever she wanted for dinner, reading to her when she was too tired to do anything else, and so on. Within the first few weeks, we noticed that Bailey's BP readings were actually improving noticeably. Her mean readings went from 148/95 in October to 118/80 in November. The swelling improved so much that she was finally starting to look more like her old self again. One thing we really truly were not expecting, and her team seemed a little bit confused by, is just how hungry she got. Again, Bailey tracks everything very carefully, and we could see that she was eating a few hundred, it was like 200 to 300, I think, calories per day more than usual, and not gaining any weight, even week over week. Through this time, I was pretty sure this was all good news. She was tired because her immune system was beating up the cancer. She was hungry because immune cells need to be replaced frequently while consuming cells. They can't be reused indefinitely. And the tumors were pretty big, so it stands to reason that you need to eat and sleep quite a lot to kill something that's like this big. I really was confident that everything was going well, but obviously I was also just trying to encourage my wife. So there was always a little bit of, I did believe it, but I also was trying to believe it, if that makes sense to you. That's actually something we kind of realized fairly early on in the process. Regardless of whether you think it's realistic, it is more productive to believe that what you're doing matters than to think that what you do doesn't matter. This seems kind of obvious when you word it like this, but it's pretty good advice. Just generally, even when you don't have cancer, just in general, even if you don't think you have much power to change things, you're better off believing that what you do can make a difference than believing that you can't do anything at all. Sometimes you really are powerless, but sometimes you're not. And a lot of times you really can't tell which situation you're in until it's over. With cancer, there are points where hope truly is lost, and you just have to accept the situation and prepare for the inevitable. But don't jump to that state prematurely. After the first month or so, the side effects started to improve. The skin sensitivity didn't go away, but the total body rash did. She was still exhausted, but she could stay up for at least a few hours each day without feeling too terrible. With the improving blood pressure and swelling, she was able to cut back on the BP meds and diuretics. Getting rid of the beta blocker in particular gave her a lot of energy back. Things were really looking up. There were, however, some new side effects. Neuropathy, tingling, and loss of sensation in the feet and a little bit in the hands. Worse, she gained a verbal twitch that pops up whenever she's overly stressed or tired. As of January 23rd, these symptoms have not gone away, but they are stable, so she's still good to continue treatment. We returned to MD Anderson for more scans in December, meeting with the team on the 26th. We actually didn't have any surprise ER visit, dead fish omens, or pulmonary embolisms this time. But in some ways, it was actually the most stressful of the trips. See, I had specifically comforted Bailey during the last trip by reminding her that we'd been told from the beginning, if we were going to see a miracle, it would be during immunotherapy. So it wasn't really that big of a deal if EDP started to lose effectiveness or didn't really get anything done. We were just waiting for immunotherapy. Well, now we're a few cycles of pembrolizumab in, and we're waiting to see whether we get that miracle or not. I distinctly remember sitting with Bailey and her parents in the waiting room and silently trying to prepare myself for what I'd do if the results were bad. I really did think that we'd get good news. Her BP and swelling were doing so much better, so that must mean that the treatment was working. But it was also possible that the improved symptoms were just the result of her blood mitotane levels finally getting up to the therapeutic dose. You have to take a lot of mitotane for months on end before it hits a therapeutic level, and we were finally just getting there at around this time. So maybe the long-term prognosis was no different and we were only seeing an improvement of symptoms due to mitotane. I really didn't figure out what I would have said. I don't know. I don't know what I would have said if we would have gotten in there and they would have given us really bad news. I tried to think of something, but honestly, I think I just would have vomited or fainted or just sat there with a dead expression. I don't know. Thankfully, I didn't have to figure it out. I do feel like I need to call out here again that I am not a doctor. I am certainly not an oncologist. And if you find yourself in this situation and your immunotherapy doesn't work, I have no idea what this means for you. Don't lose hope until your team tells you that there's no hope, and then find another team and ask them too. Don't give in to scammers, but do check with other teams. Our first prognosis was 6 months in the worst case, and we are well past that already. But fortunately, I never had to figure out what I would have said if the results were negative, because they were actually really, really good. Before we headed out, our team at Fred Hutch actually cautioned us that immunotherapy can sometimes cause a little bit of swelling around tumors, which on a CT might look like mild growth. So we shouldn't lose hope even if the tumors actually did grow a little bit. In the liver, the tumors shrunk significantly. The results called out some examples shrinking from 4.7 centimeters to 2.3 centimeters, 5.6 to 4.5, 6.1 to 3.7. Bear in mind these tumors are roughly spherical, so a 50% reduction in diameter is something like a 90% reduction in volume. The primary tumor is roughly the same size, but the tissue on the scan is clearly necrotic and calcified. And if you do a before and after scan, you don't have to be a doctor to know which one looks like the one that's getting really messed up by immunotherapy. These are exactly the results that we were praying for. Of course, it can't all be good. Those little lung nodules from way earlier, the ones that were totally caused by a Midwestern fungus when she was a kid and it's just scarring, well, they shrunk too by similar amounts, which makes the odds that those are actually metastases relatively high. We also saw evidence of a tumor on her thyroid and 2 in different bones. None of these potential metastases are sufficient to alter our plans, but we are going to need to focus on them eventually. With all this good news, we went back to the original plan. EDP plus mitotane, then pembro plus mitotane, then, if we're lucky, surgery, going for a cure. These early results weren't sufficient to go in for surgery immediately, but the plan is now to continue immunotherapy until March, then see if we can go back for surgery. One member of Bailey's team referred to these results as a good start, which is actually a little bit surprisingly demoralizing given how much we've already been through, but again, I actually really appreciate his bluntness in telling us what to expect. In any case, I'd much rather be at a good start than a bad end. This brings us all to today. We have the flight and hotel booked for the next trip to MD Anderson in March. We have the Disney Princess 5K in February to keep our morale up. Bailey returned to work in January and just got a good review for her work last year, so we're feeling a little bit better about finances and about her career. The surgery sounds just awful, and we might wind up taking the primary tumor, some liver tumors, some intestine, a kidney, and maybe even part of the pancreas. It's going to suck, but it doesn't feel like wishful thinking to hope that I'll be able to keep Bailey around for decades to come. So that's the timeline. And I put a lot of my thoughts and advice in line with that timeline, but now I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to sort of ramble about some of the things that stuck out to me the most. Again, normally I would try to edit and organize this better, but I'm just going to keep going because, again, this video is hard and I'm not going to finish it and get it published if I don't just do it. In terms of concrete advice, seriously, keep everything organized. Take notes during appointments. Record every dose of medication. A home blood pressure monitor isn't expensive. Record all the results in a way where you can display the data as both a list and as a graph. Use Excel or Google spreadsheets or Garmin as an app for this. Get a good bathroom scale and get daily weights. Keep your meds organized and always have a med bag ready in case you need to run to the hospital. We also have a first aid bag as well in case we have to run somewhere and I need to have bandages with me for whatever reason. If you don't know where the nearest ER is, look it up and then actually try driving there a few times without using a GPS so you can do it comfortably even while stressed or tired. Track food in something like Chronometer or what have you, and talk to a cancer dietitian about what you should be eating. Smoothies are an easy way to help with nutrition. We use a Ninja food processor to make them in a batch, and then I put them in pint containers and freeze them so Bailey can eat them like ice cream. For each batch, I document the whole list of ingredients with weights, and I enter it on either a piece of paper for her to read later, or I put it directly as a recipe into Chronometer. I then write the name of the recipe and the mass for the individual serving on each container's lid with a white erase marker and leave it for whenever she wants it. For ingredients, I usually use yogurt, whey powder, PB2 Pure, it's powdered peanuts, spinach, kale, mixed berries, bananas, apples, pomegranate juice, sometimes even some tofu, which actually, as long as you don't do too much, you can barely even taste it and it adds a ton of protein. If she hasn't gotten any food with a particular color for a while, I'll try to balance that in with the smoothies or else with planning our meals. I've been using a Dash diet cookbook my mom got us for most of our meals, swapping in Impossible meat for beef whenever relevant. We already use natural no-stir peanut butter, but that actually contains palm oil, which is indicated in some studies as encouraging metastasis, so Bailey switched to 100% peanut butter, the kind that you have to stir. We still order food on occasion, but I try to cook most of our meals and I try to use fresh ingredients whenever I can, getting a variety of different nutrients. Canned water, like LaCroix or Talking Rain or what have you, is an excellent way to keep hydration up during chemo. A lot of chemo patients will have sort of a taste in their mouth. Bailey definitely got this, so that tap water tasted kind of gross. Canned water is fine. The cancer dietitian said there was really no problem with just having canned water constantly. So she goes through a ton of it. It's a little expensive and we have to crush all the cans or else our recycling will be full, but hydration is really, really important. Herbal and decaf tea really help for that too. Emesis bags are an absolute necessity. Bailey really didn't need them very often, but just having one nearby reduces the stress of being nauseous. They really do work well. No mess and very easy to clean up. We have some in the car. I bring them to the airport. We have them all over the house, and I have some inside my backpack. The large, vomit bins are also really good to have at home as they're easier to aim into. And I know this is really, really gross, but it's important to have a way, if you're taking meds and you have to vomit right afterwards, to vomit into something that you can sift through. It's much easier to put on some gloves and sift through the bottom of a plastic tub than it is to have to reach into a toilet or a sink. Because you really need to know were there meds in the vomit sometimes if it happens in the first hour or so right after taking the meds. Of course, plastic gloves are also important too for just a huge number of things, for wound care, for sifting through vomit, for taking medicine, if it's a medicine that really you can't get on anyone else. You can buy all this stuff online, but anytime you need basic medical supplies, try just asking a nurse or a tech during an appointment. Not only is there a chance that they'll just grab you a bunch right out of the drawer, but they might even actually have some ideas on better options to hand you. This is how I discovered that really, really nice kind of gooey gauze tape. I asked a wound care nurse and she gave me some rolls. Getting a cheap walker can be worthwhile even if the patient is relatively young and healthy, especially for something like the airport. Just having a portable second seat to put your feet up on was really, really nice on that first trip when she was done with the first 5 cycles of EEP. It was really nice to just be able to plop her down in a seat, put the walker around and have her put her feet up on that so she can kind of lay down and try to sleep a little bit when there weren't any benches or anything available. A walker is a medical device, so it actually shouldn't count against your bags and carry-ons if you have to take it on a flight. Audiobooks, e-readers, and portable gaming consoles are really nice for being stuck in airports, hotels, and emergency rooms. Obviously, I feel like we know it at this point. If you're going for a trip out of state to a cancer hospital, be aware that you might not know how long it's going to take, so bring extra clothes, bring your work laptop, even if you don't plan on working. It's nice to have it and not need it. And if you do need it, you're going to be really, really glad that you don't have to have somebody ship it over to you. I will say too, smartphone games are getting actually reasonably good these days. I played a lot of Honkai Star Rail when we were first stuck in Houston, even though I think I literally haven't touched it once since getting back. But it was a great way to kind of keep myself sane when I was just living in the hospital for weeks on end. Friends and family are critically important to getting through something like this. Allow them to help, even if it feels kind of weird at times. Also, bear in mind, however, that you're going to get advice from every single direction and not all of it is good. Even this video that you're listening to right now, ask your care team about the stuff I'm saying and see if they have a better idea or if they contradict me. Maybe I'm wrong for your cancer, or maybe a week from now, some new study is going to come out showing that everything I just said is wrong. So, I hope this helps, but everyone out there thinks they have something that can help with cancer. Some of the advice is good. Some of it isn't good. It is a little bit on you to try to sift through that and figure out what's good. But if you have a good cancer team, then they'll be able to help you with that as well. For caregivers, I'm honestly not sure what advice to even leave you with. I think on some level, all I can really offer is empathy. Being a caregiver is, at times, really, really frustrating in ways that might make you feel selfish or kind of in the way. Doctors know that the husband is fair game for punching down on when they need a target for a mood-lightening joke. As a caregiver, you'll occasionally notice symptoms that the patient might not agree with. Obviously, you can't know someone else's feelings, but having this outsider perspective as a caregiver can occasionally give you a better position to make an objective observation on when a symptom started or how severe it was compared to other ones. There's one member of Bailey's care team who very clearly just kind of gets annoyed anytime I speak up during appointments. I have to imagine that this is a split between A, she's just very busy, she wants to get through the appointment as quickly as possible, and she would rather just have one person to talk to than two, and B, she probably does read this a little bit as a husband talking over his wife or talking over her. And I get that, but the two of them talk so fast and they leave no pause between topics. So there's really no way for me to add anything whether a question or an observation, without interrupting. And I'm not going to be bullied into keeping quiet by someone who's just in too much of a hurry to have a polite conversation with two people at once. But I also don't want to add any stress to Bailey or to annoy someone that might be on our team. So I'm going to keep giving my observations, giving my feedback, and asking my questions whenever I think it's necessary. And when she gets annoyed and starts throwing condescending, shitty little comments my way, I'll just smile and pretend I didn't hear them, or just keep the conversation going, because that's really all you can do sometimes. It's frustrating. It happens to me at appointments fairly often. I imagine it happens to other people too. It is annoying. You'll just have to deal with it. It can actually be surprisingly difficult sometimes, spending every waking second caring for someone else, just dedicating all of your time just to doing a thing and not really being seen for it. I don't mean to say that I'm not getting plenty of support and recognition from friends and family. Far from it. Many people make an effort to come over and talk to me as the spouse, as the caregiver, and try to give me support and, praise and whatnot. A lot of it. But it can feel weird sometimes being so thoroughly in the thick of it, but still kind of treated as an outsider, expected to keep quiet and just wait for someone to need a valet. You'll get conflicting messages sometimes from the same people, telling you to take care of yourself in one moment, then criticizing you for caring about something as frivolous as finance at a time like this. At times, people will try to empathize with you the best they can, but even then, it'll only feel like they're equating their situation to yours. Okay, so I've tried to put some of the emotional turmoil into the rest of this rant, but seriously, it's difficult to explain or even to understand myself sometimes. Dealing with grief and stress like this stretches what you're capable of processing rationally. It's not all really relatable, intuitive stuff sometimes, being under this much pressure. I'll just hyper-focus on something bizarre or get really anxious over something entirely inconsequential. Meanwhile, things that would have made me really anxious before hardly even catch my attention these days. I'm at the point where I'm probably fearless and calm over my own mortality to an excessive extent, but I'm absolutely dreading our trip to Disney World. It's not just that I hate traveling or Disney, which is part of it, but if something goes wrong, it could ruin our last trip together. While driving with Bailey in the car, the smallest issue on the road stresses me out. After all, she's on blood thinners. Even a fairly minor crash could be fatal for her. One day, she must have nicked her leg shaving, and we didn't notice until there was a pool of blood beneath her. So imagine what would happen if she hit her head on a dashboard, even in a 20-mile-an-hour collision. While driving alone, even narrowly avoiding a head-on collision hardly bumped my heart rate at all. One of the strangest things I've actually noticed about myself is that I've started to really resent older people at cancer hospitals. It's absolutely crazy to see a person suffering, facing the end of their life, and feel anger and frustration towards them. But given how young Bailey is, how young we are, it's honestly been really frustrating to constantly overhear people double our age complaining about their cancer. I mean, it's a cancer hospital. Of course, it's filled with older people. That's who gets cancer. What do you expect? But when we're sitting here praying to get 30 more years, praying that Bailey could maybe be 50 or 60 or God, maybe 70. We're not even hoping for 80 at this point. We're not even really hoping for 70, just 50 or 60. And then to have to wait in line behind a bunch of people who are already 60, 70, 80, 90. It's just infuriating sometimes. I mean, hell, my dad died in his early 50s of a genetic disorder that I also have. Most of these cancer patients we run into are older than I will ever get, much less Bailey. This response obviously isn't healthy. I'm not proud of it. Bailey doesn't feel this way at all. Okay, so just to be perfectly clear here, this is an unpleasant, intrusive thought. It's offensive. I was literally the first person to get offended at this thought. I'm not sharing it here because I endorse it. it's not even a coherent thought. Where would you draw the line? I've seen little kids, a fraction of Bailey's age at MD Anderson. How would they feel hearing me talk about how tragic it is that Bailey in her 30s won't make it to be 60 or 90 when there are people with cancer, with other various diseases that are dying before they're even 10 years old, less than a third of Bailey's age. None of this is fair for anybody. And in fact, I've talked in this video a couple of times already about how Bailey's youth is in some ways actually a blessing because she's more likely to survive the treatment and maybe even get a cure. I could easily see someone in their 50s, 60s, 70s hear me talk about this right now and think, wow, what a spoiled jerk. His wife might actually make it because she's so young. I wish I would have gotten my diagnosis when I was in my 30s rather than in my 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, when you're less likely to survive the treatment. So it's, again, this isn't a good thought. And I think that feeling some bitterness at the unfairness of illness and death is perfectly normal. It might even be healthy in small doses to kind of rage at the injustice of the world here. But to direct this bitterness at other cancer patients, we should be on the same team. I'm really just sharing this here because this is the sort of weird, unpleasant, emotional stuff that happens to you, that's happening to me at least, when you're forced to just stand by powerless and watch your partner just dying in front of you. As a couple, cancer has been weird. We were always very close, but the cancer has actually brought us much closer together. I started a Google Doc titled Bailey Engram, where we just jot down anything that feels significant about Bailey or about us and our relationship. Favorite colors for each season, favorite songs and playlists, our combined recollection of various events. Most of it is stuff I already know intimately, but having a document makes me feel better. I sometimes get really anxious that if Bailey doesn't make it, I'll start to forget her, to forget us over the decades to come. I made recordings of her voice. We've been taking more pictures. I've been scrambling to make all the alterations to the house that she wants so that it can really feel like our home while she's living in it. And I'm terrified that I'll have to lose the home. It's too big for one person, but it's ours. I don't think I could live anywhere else. All right, so I'm almost done with the editing, but the last couple of points turned out to be kind of muddled. Radagast had to go out, and then I kind of just lost my train of thought. So I'm going to go ahead and just re-record the whole ending bit here. God, this video really has been just incredibly tedious. I'm really looking forward to finishing this one up, getting it published, and moving on to my regular content. So another form of unexpected drama we've found since the diagnosis is, and this is the part that was muddled before, it's really hard to explain. So I'm going to take another crack at it. Hopefully this one will be better. But it's kind of like we've been speed running the rest of our relationship. This bit might not make sense if you haven't been in a long-term relationship before, but try to bear with me here. Our experience, my experience with being in a long-term relationship, we're hitting our 12th anniversary this month while we're at Disney World, is that you continue to become better partners to one another as time goes on, no matter how long things go on for. You don't just figure it all out in the first couple of years. Ideally, you get through the biggest potential deal breakers early on. Stuff like, do you want kids? Where do you want to live? What are your careers like? Do you both get a full career, or is one of you going to stay at home or scale it back? What counts as infidelity or appropriate behavior with other people, etc. The kind of stuff that would be a huge deal breaker if you found out about it down the road and you want to find out before you actually get married, combine bank accounts, move in together, stuff like that. But as time goes on, a healthy relationship also improves in a lot of other ways that aren't anywhere near as obvious, but are still just as important. Stuff like, what are both of your love languages? Do you need compliments, physical affection, or gifts? Or is it more about having chores done on time? Is it trust and freedom, etc.? Do you like it when your partner dresses up nice for you even when you're just staying in? Or do you find it more comfortable and intimate to just wear pajamas when you're together for a date night? Does your partner want you to lose some fat or gain some muscle? Maybe your partner likes you with short hair and no beard, but they'd like you even more with crazy wizard hair and a long half beard. This might all seem like kind of little petty stuff, but as a healthy relationship matures, you keep iterating on how to be the best partner, and things continue to get better and better between you. Of course, sometimes things don't get better, and some of these little things, which might not have felt like a big deal when you were first dating, they might have even been kind of endearing, can turn into major resentments or even a feeling of betrayal after years and years. Maybe you tell your partner that getting flowers makes you feel loved on your second date, and then they bring you flowers on your third date. Things work out and you move in together, even get married, and your partner just sort of forgets to get you flowers more than once or twice per year. After a decade of not getting flowers, except for maybe on your birthday, it starts to turn into a real resentment. Why won't they get me flowers? I told them that getting flowers makes me feel loved. Don't they even love me? To be clear, this is a purely rhetorical example. I'm just illustrating a point, but let's say that after years of not really getting flowers from your partner, you then see that they bought a bouquet, but it's not for you. They're bringing it to work. It's a promotion gift for a coworker. And it just breaks your heart. It's not about the flowers, really. And it would be crazy to accuse your partner of being unfaithful or something just because they bought a coworker a promotion gift. But, you know, damn it, how dare they get flowers for a coworker and not you? Why do they love their coworker more than they love you? So you have a big fight about it, which really sucks. But in the course of having this fight, your partner realizes that they had just forgotten how much you love flowers. Because of this fight, they start getting you flowers more often. At first, this actually makes you resent them even more. It doesn't really count if they're just buying you the flowers to keep you from getting mad. Like, it doesn't count as a display of affection if you had to ask them to do it. At this point, you're basically just getting flowers for yourself. It's just taking more steps. But getting those flowers still makes you feel loved. And as the months go by, you see that your partner really did just forget. It didn't mean that they didn't love you. And now that they remember it, now that they truly realize it, now they're buying you flowers even when you aren't expecting it. Maybe they go even further. They start tending to flowers in the yard, taking it beyond even what you expected from them in the beginning. You had a fight, but things got better because of it. Normally, you have little experiences like this here and there throughout a relationship. But when you learn that your spouse might not have much time left, suddenly any unresolved conflicts between you have a clock on them. What if you never had that fight about flowers? Your partner dies, and then for the rest of your life, you regret that they never really got you flowers, even though it would have made you feel really special. The only rational solution, obviously, is to just trudge through every unresolved conflict in the entire relationship as fast as possible, spilling every secret and shedding light on every grudge and insecurity. Now, obviously, this sounds silly, but it honestly has been a fairly significant part of the emotional stress of this whole situation. In some ways, it's excellent. Bailey and I have literally no secrets between us at this point, not even little ones. In mere months, we've made tremendous progress towards understanding how we each give and receive affection. We're more in love now than we ever were before. And it's not just because we're scared of losing each other, it's because we really have become better partners to one another. That flower example, again, was rhetorical. It was a major exaggeration at the very least. I never bought flowers for a coworker, but I have been getting Bailey flowers more often recently, and she's really appreciated it. It's something I always knew that she liked, but yeah, I really only did it maybe once or twice in a year. Or on the other side, Bailey's never really been very good at just giving me compliments about my appearance. It's just not something that she thinks to say out loud. She was brought up to believe that loving someone for their looks is shallow, so complimenting your partner physically is sort of crass. You should focus instead on their personality or their accomplishments. And I get that. I do. But since the diagnosis, we had a conversation where I explained that, you know, it feels kind of silly. It feels a little vain and petty, but it actually is kind of important for my self-esteem that I get compliments about my appearance and I get some casual physical intimacy from time to time. So the other day, I had just finished a workout. I had just finished lifting and I was walking around in just some jeans looking for my shirt. And out of nowhere, Bailey runs over tells me how hot I look with my shirt off just after a workout, and gives me a very gropey hug. It's such a little petty, embarrassing thing. Like, this is embarrassing to admit out loud. Like, it is. That's part of why the original recording this kind of got muddled too, is I think I got a little embarrassed and tried to, you know, I'm doing it again right now. But it's such a little petty thing, but it probably had me blushing and smiling to myself for half an hour. Honestly, even I didn't really realize just how much I was craving that sort of attention. If I had, I would have had that conversation with her earlier. It really wasn't until we were thinking, you know, what haven't I told you? What things are unresolved between us? What insecurities do we have? That I kind of realized, hey, I don't get that sort of attention often enough. And now I'm getting it, and it's awesome. It's really nice. Seriously, things between us lately have just been so good. Again, we're close to our 12th anniversary, but we've been acting as giddy around each other as we did when we first met. More than once per day, I've just gotten stuck. We've gotten stuck just staring, gazing lovingly into each other's eyes for sometimes like 2 or 3 minutes at a time. This is happening more than once in a day. It's, again, honestly a little embarrassing, but under the circumstances, who gives a shit? That all said, speedrunning decades of difficult emotional conversations while also dealing with cancer is absolutely exhausting. Try to imagine having a difficult conversation with your partner, but if they get too stressed, they get vertigo and need to take a Zofran and lie down for the entire rest of the day. Even just bringing up, hey, do you think we could resume that argument, might stress them out enough that the entire evening is ruined because they have cancer. And you can't be mad at someone for having cancer. So it's not an excuse. It's just really hard to have a serious discussion when one of the two people is trying as hard as they can to just not die. Sometimes, even when we've had a reasonably pleasant conversation and we've actually made a breakthrough, under the circumstances, we've struggled to focus on the right things. We'll focus on how much time we wasted not doing something in the past, rather than focusing on how much better things are going to be from now on, because from now on feels like it might not be very long. On top of everything else going on, this is just so emotionally complicated in a way that I am really, I wasn't prepared for. I don't think anyone can be prepared for it. I certainly wasn't. So it's been rough. It feels odd to mention this part in here since this feels like just personal relationship drama, but going through this during cancer feels like part of the cancer. I imagine that this is probably a common experience for people in this situation. Like, I wouldn't even say that our marriage is under stress or anything like that. Again, things have been much better lately, substantially better, but it's been stressful. It's been exhausting. It's been hard. Every single piece of this is exhausting, frustrating, and hard. Anyways, I don't actually know. I have no real idea as to whether this is a common experience for couples facing the possibility of loss like this, but again, it really seems like it would be. When you discover that you might not have much time left, of course you want to take care of any important business that you thought you'd always have time for. As much as cancer sucks, I'm truly grateful that it's pushed us to grow so much as a couple. Again, we've been together for almost 12 years, and we were already an uncommonly intimate couple with an extremely healthy marriage. Like, we were already very, very good together, better together than most other couples I know of. It's not like we were bad and now things are back on track. We were great, and now I feel like we have the relationship maturity of a couple in their 60s. Like, I feel like we really did speed run 30 years of our relationship. Maybe that's silly. I don't know. That's how it feels to me. So as a piece of advice, if you're in a relationship, it really is worthwhile to try to have these conversations early when nothing else is going on. Get a couple's workbook or something. Discuss your love languages, what you like about one another, and anything about your relationship that makes you feel frustrated or insecure. It's not fun to work through this stuff, but it's absolutely worth it. And it's a lot easier to have a conversation like that when you're not scrambling for time. I also really recommend just having a general shared document where you record any essential details about your relationship. The sort of little things that you know, and don't even seem worth writing down because it's not like you're going to forget. But if they were gone for decades, you would drive yourself crazy worrying that you're misremembering. There's no possible way that I could ever forget Bailey and My Song, Brett Spiner's version of It's a Sin to Tell a Lie. But I feel much more comfortable having it written down in a document. I would hate to look back 30 years from now and wonder whether I'm remembering Bailey right, or if after decades of her absence, I've invented a fantasy version of her in my mind. All right, so one last point, and then I really, really want to wrap this up. So after my dad died from cirrhosis caused by alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, I learned that I needed to be more careful about alcohol than most people. At the time, this was several years ago, I was still kind of drinking like a college student. Though, honestly, this was partially like a college student and partially just dev culture in the Pacific Northwest. So I decided I was going to just completely quit drinking for a year or so. And then after that, I'd either go back to just, having a drink once or twice in a week, like just like on a Friday night, or if I'd have no alcohol whatsoever. This is how I learned that basically everyone on TV is constantly drinking. In Game of Thrones, which was still airing at the time, I swear they pour a fresh glass of wine about once every other minute. It was just everywhere. Cool characters are often defined by their favorite drink. And it actually made quitting alcohol, even just for a year, really, really difficult. It was pretty messed up. I imagine this happens for smoking as well. That's never been one of my vices, but I imagine it's probably similar. Any kind of marketable vice, I imagine you get this for. Well, I never thought of it before, but I'm kind of experiencing the same realization now with media portrayals of people who have lost a spouse, particularly for leading older male characters. It's really, really common. Which, I mean, it is a compelling story. Obviously, I think so, or else I wouldn't be making this video. And I don't think that writers need to necessarily limit themselves to only portray situations that they've been in personally. But in a lot of these cases, it really feels like a dead or dying spouse is just used as a cheap way to make a tough male character emotionally vulnerable in a way that doesn't diminish their masculinity, which is kind of gross when you think about it. Even when it plays a somewhat larger role, I've come to see that it just isn't done very well in most cases. Don't get me wrong, it's actually been really helpful to have all these characters to lean on for inspiration right now. Like, hell, I recently did an Evangelion rewatch, and I was surprised to find that I was relating more to Gendo Ikari than I ever did before, which is not a thing I ever thought would happen. But the constant reminder every time I'm trying to find something to escape into during cancer and I keep accidentally running into this trope again, it really kind of sucks. And it generally isn't treated as something that could be emotionally traumatic for an audience in the same way that the death of a child or rape or the death of a pet or suicide is. It's often kind of just thrown right in your face. It's just kind of a thing that happens, and the narrative almost can't help but try to skip directly ahead to asking how long the survivor is going to take to get over it. I actually really liked, for example, that the Babadook specifically calls this out in the narrative. It specifically calls out people trying to get her to get over her husband's death. And it goes into that. It's not used as a trope in there. I actually really liked that. It's a very rare case of that. I mean, I love Max Payne. It's one of my all-time favorite video game series, but we really don't learn anything about Max's wife. She's just dead as part of his backstory. I think this is probably the thing, or one of the things that sticks out to me the most. I feel like if you're going to study a character who loses a spouse, then you should have to learn something about the spouse. I can't imagine mourning Bailey without talking about her in detail. This is actually one of the cases where Deep Space Nine, despite being an absolute ripoff of Babylon 5, completely excels beyond the original. Frankly, I honestly didn't really think Sheridan was that great of a character just in general. I feel like he was the weakest part of the show. And his dead wife backstory isn't a great... It's a great example of how flat he is just as a character. Like, it's a great show. Sheridan, I thought Sheridan kind of sucked, and the dead wife bit was part of that. There's almost nothing to it. She hasn't even been dead that long, and he's already chasing Delenn. It just felt so hollow to me. Either fake, or just he never really cared about her in the first place. And in either case, there's nothing to invest in there. Benjamin Sisko, on the other hand, mourns his wife in a way that feels extremely relatable to me. I already played a little tiny clip of that earlier. I'll probably put a longer version here, 'cause this scene feels very, very real to me right now.
I don't know if you can understand. I see her like this. Every time I close my eyes, in the darkness, in the blink of an eye, I see her like this.
None of your past experiences help prepare you for this consequence.
And I have never figured out how to live without her.
So you choose to exist here. It is not linear.
I don't know what the creative process for these two shows was, but I get the impression that the writing for Cisco at the very least involved a conversation with someone who lost a spouse. But for Babylon 5, I don't feel like they even tried here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that is someone's experience, but it certainly isn't mine. This is just my reading. I have a whole series of analysis videos on the Wheel of Time. And in that whole series, do we ever learn anything significant about Elena? We just see Luz Theron's sorrow. I mean, I'm not saying this is a plot hole. Without spoiling anything, there are reasons why we might not get too many details about that. But nonetheless, it's the loss of a spouse here as a pure symbol. It's not a real thing that could happen to a real person. It's sort of a thought experiment in dealing with death. A one-line backstory. Just...
Here's my fucking downloaded brain, Morty. You wanna jump the shark? You wanna know my stupid crybaby backstory? Knock yourself out. Not now! Whoa. Dead wife? Yes, now everyone can shut up about it.
I don't mean to make a huge deal about this. I imagine that anyone who's been through anything traumatic probably notices how their trauma is just used as a cheap symbol to move a story forward at some point. But it is a little bit frustrating. And it definitely makes me like certain shows less. For any creators out there, the two things that bug me the most about this are, one, when the character mourning their spouse doesn't talk about them in detail. If you're going to include a dead spouse in your story, then I feel like the dead spouse is a character and you should flesh them out. The surviving spouse should mourn a person, not a symbol. And two, don't be in such a damn hurry to just rush towards moving on. I'm not saying that people can't move on from something like this. I mean, I plan not to. If Bailey doesn't survive, I'll just mourn her for the rest of my life. I'm not going into that again, but if someone else can move on and live again, then that's great for them. I don't have a problem with that. But you need to do at least something to indicate how difficult this is. Jaheira and Khalid is a reasonably good example of this from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Above all else, avoid announcing that someone's spouse died purely to set up a romance plot now that they're single. Just gross. I was trying to watch Star Trek Picard lately, and I just stopped watching after the first episode of season 2. There's a scene in there where literally a character's spouse is announced as being dead in the same moment that it's being framed as, well, now there's an opportunity for new romance. And it just, again, if that works for somebody, it was gross for me. Maybe I'll get back to the show. It really pulled me out of it. Anyways, I could keep going for a really long while, but I should just call it here. I think I've said most of the important stuff by now, probably repeated myself a couple times too. Normally, I would polish this a lot more, probably prepare for this scene a little bit better too, but this hasn't been a fun video to make. I wanted to put something out. I've been saying I want to make a video about the cancer diagnosis for months and months. It's a crazy situation. I have a bit of a platform here, and I think I'm pretty good at articulating complex emotional topics. But I'm really, really looking forward to getting back to my usual content. Like I said in the intro, I'm currently working on A Court of Thorns and Roses right now, the whole series, not just the first book, which isn't even close to my usual genre. I usually don't do romance novels, but that's also why I'm reading a ton of extra material in order to provide more context and some comments on the genre as a whole. And although I haven't actually started writing the script yet, I have a ton of notes on my whiteboard already, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of my better videos. So please subscribe if you're interested in literary criticism. I also have videos on all of the Wheel of Time, Mage Errant, and some of Sanderson's Cosmere, which I plan to go further into after I'm done with the Kotar. I'll probably make another video about cancer at some point in the future, if only to provide an update after surgery, but I don't have anything else specific planned right now, and I absolutely do not want this just to become a cancer channel. Even if this video somehow takes off really viral, I don't care. I'm not interested in being a cancer channel. I'll make videos when I have something to say. I want to talk about literature. That's why I'm here. I really, really hate even the appearance of an ad. I hate ads. So I didn't link to any specific products here. If you're watching ads during this video, I recommend ad block, by the way. Please, ad block, uBlock, no script. There's ways around it. Look it up. Don't watch ads. Definitely don't watch them on my channel. I'm not making money off it, so it doesn't even matter to me. But that said, if you can't find any of the products I mentioned here or any other products that you can kind of guess that I alluded to at some point in this whole story, feel free to leave a comment and I'll see if I can dig up a link to whatever we bought. Feel free to ask any other questions too, and I'll try to get back to you eventually, but don't be surprised if it takes me a couple of days. I'm not the quickest on responding to messages. If I know you IRL and you're gearing up to call me to chat about anything in here, please, please don't. I tried to be extremely candid in here in order to provide a good account, but I truly, sincerely do not want to talk about it. Yes, I know that parts of this were very dark. No, I don't want to talk about it. It is what it is. And I don't mean to sound arrogant here, but I've thought about this all quite a bit. You're not going to come up with anything I didn't already think of. If I need help, I will ask for it. Anyways, I hope this was helpful or at the very least interesting. Feel free to leave a comment if you'd like. We really do appreciate all the support we receive, and it's truly touching to know that we're in some of your thoughts and prayers. I don't know that such things actually make a tangible impact, but it certainly helps our morale, and that's worth something. So thoughts and prayers are appreciated. Thank you so much for the people that have already sent helpful comments. Every time I get a comment of support for Bailey, I take my phone right away and show her like, oh, hey, another person on my channel, said something nice about you. It really does lift our spirits. If you want to help out more directly, there are plenty of great charities out there. I'll put up a link to our Disney Princess 5K Team Stormpillar donation link, which goes to the American Cancer Society. But I'm also a big fan of Child's Play. Bailey's pretty young for a cancer diagnosis, but we see plenty of kids at MD Anderson too. And as awful as this is for us, as young as we feel compared to other people with cancer, a charity that tries to make things easier for kids in hospitals is a good idea. So ACS and Child's Play would be the two charities I would plug here.